Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene our Dana Point City Council meeting for October 21st. City Attorney Munoz, do we have anything to report out of our closed session?
We had no reportable items from closed session this evening, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll rise, Councilmember Olvera will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the invocation this evening will be provided by Chaplain Maury Hanson of the VFW Post 9934.
Veterans, please salute. Place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Uncover if you have one. Thank you. I was going to watch you tonight. Lord, we come before you tonight. We ask for your guidance upon holding high principles at the foundation of our city of Dana Point. And let us put those principles and goals into action. Help us to fully appreciate the joy of bonding friendship of our city officers and all it offers to the community. Enrich our lives in the self-satisfaction of being of service to fellow citizens. Let us hold high the torch of love, charity, and tolerance for all to see. There are many deliberations before this council and staff. Grant them wisdom and comfort, that all the decisions are made to promote the well-being of all of our citizens and the overall community. There will be those who may not agree, but grant us the understanding that all opinions count, but decisions must be made, and even when there's a difference of views and a difference of importance. Grant, we pray, that the love, wisdom, and understanding be instilled in the minds of our mayor, city council, city manager, and all of our staff. Therefore, we ask of all the citizens of Dana Point, provide support of all of those making these very difficult decisions. Lord, may we always keep in mind that decisions are being made at the best reasoning, judgment, and logic of our city council. They have been elected by the majority of the city. Let us respect them with their decisions, even when they're not in agreement with our own. And in closing, I'd like to add that all the members that are running for new offices, we grant you Godspeed. We hope that you'll be elected. In the name of the Father, Son, amen.
Please be seated. Okay, we have no presentations and proclamations this evening. We'll now move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine, and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items to be removed by city staff this evening?
Not this evening, Mayor Bartlett.
Okay. Any items to be removed by the public?
None, Mayor Bartlett.
Okay. And by the City Council? Okay, I'd like to remove item number 10. Do we have a motion to approve
I'll move
the
the
balance?
balance.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. It passes. We'll now move back to item number 10. Could we have a staff report on this item, please?
Of course, Mayor Bartlett. Item number 10 is an update on the county ambulance contract RFP process. What I've tried to provide as far as background is the fact that prior to this last cycle of ambulance contracts, each city had the ability to decide for themselves at the local level who was going to be their ambulance provider, and OCFA handled the oversight of the award in the RFP process. Up until the cycle, Dana Point was one of the cities who chose to administer it themselves and select the ambulance provider to serve its community. Other cities in Orange County had deferred that or elected to have OCFA do that for them. Doctors Ambulance has served Dana Point for a number of years, and quite candidly, I've been quite pleased with their ability to become an integral part of our emergency response team. We also had staff who participated on the evaluation panels. And as I talked to people who were involved in the evaluation process, I became concerned because the county health care agency basically oversaw and did a lot of the legwork rather than OCFA. And during that process, the individuals who did the actual scoring on the evaluation panels didn't have the ability to receive a presentation from the various providers. They weren't allowed to do site visits. They didn't have the ability to review references and do a lot of what we would consider customary and ordinary practices during any type of RFP or hiring process. It was almost if you hire an applicant without an interview or reviewing references. So what I've tried to do in the staff report is identify some current concerns that I have, and I think a better process would be for the evaluation panels to have the ability to receive presentations, review references, come out, kick the tires, if you will, and get input from the communities that these ambulance providers serve, as opposed to the way it was conducted. I think a more informed decision could have been made. When it was all said and done, the recommendation was from the healthcare agency and the evaluation panel for our region, which consisted of Aliso Viejo, Laguna Woods, Laguna Hills, Laguna Niguel, and Dana Point, was to go with Care Ambulance and have doctors as the recommended alternate. What I would like to do is ask for council authorization to send correspondence on behalf of the city indicating that we feel that a more thorough evaluation process be conducted from the various ambulance providers to make sure that we get the best and most qualified ambulance provider. Don't get me wrong, Care Ambulance is a more than capable provider, but I think a level playing surface has to be so everybody can have a fair and equal opportunity to get a contract. And I think there are a lot of factors that need to come into the evaluation process. So with that, I will complete my staff report. I believe I saw Christy McDaniel here earlier this evening. Dave Sanford might be here, as well as Mike Herron from Doctors Ambulance, should the council have any question of doctors to get their insight into the evaluation process and RFP process that they participated in. So with that, staff and I would be happy to respond to any queries from the council.
Okay, I do have some questions for Doctors Ambulance. If we could have a representative step forward to the podium, please. Could you just state your name for the record, please?
Mike Herron, Senior Vice President, Doctors Ambulance.
Okay, I just have a few questions. The county took the 19 cities and turned them into 5 different zones. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then how many zones or cities did Doctors Ambulance bid on?
We bid on 3.
On 3? Okay.
Yes.
And how did your bid differ from one zone versus the other, the other 2, for instance, or were they the same in each zone?
Well, we bid on 3, and we bid basically on the current area that we have, with the exception of Villa Park. Our
Okay.
bid was identical region to region, except for deployment and station locations. There was virtually no difference in our bid. Region C, Region D, Region E.
Okay, so because you were the preferred provider in, not in our zone, but in others, but your bid was the same, identical in all the zones, is that
Yes, it
correct?
was. And-
Okay,
And
that was,
that's our issue with the protest, yes.
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Council members, do you have any questions of Mr. Herron? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And then questions for staff. Is there any way that we can verify that the evaluation panelists had no connection to any provider bidding on our zone, whether it be in the past or the present?
I don't believe we can confirm that right now, but in our letter or in the body of my staff report, I would anticipate that, for example, let's suppose someone on the evaluation panel, we had offered up Mike Rose to participate, and there was a decision made that representatives from, if you represented an agency who was served by doctors, you could not serve on that region. So Mike, for example, went up and worked on another region, not having any connection to Dana Point. My concern is not with Mike Rose, but with the process and the fact that, let's suppose you were to have an official or a city representative for a North County city who had, let's say, for purposes purely of discussion, if they had a very favorable impression of Care Ambulance but have no experience with doctors. And so having said that, absent the type of discovery of presentations, inspections, being able to ask questions, can they really make an informed, unbiased decision based upon the information that was presented? And that's why I think in the hypothetical, if that were to occur, I don't think that in this case the competition would necessarily get a fair shake. So that's my concern, and that's what I would recommend that you allow me to outline in our letter, saying that there is the potential for bias.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, I will move the recommended action for this item.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that passes. We now move on to public comments. There will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 15 minutes for this public comments portion of the agenda. At the mayor's discretion, the balance of public comments will be heard after the new business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the City Council and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the City Council from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. The city clerk will distribute any handouts that you have. Okay, we'll now start our public comments. I will call your name. Please state your name and city of residence when you come forth to the podium, please. The first individual is Geralt Claude.
My name is Claude Giraud. Good evening, Mrs. Mayor and council members, as well as members of the public. As a Dana Point resident of 36 years, I very much appreciate the present improvements to beautify our city for its 25th anniversary. On our frequent walks around the Strands and the headlands, my wife and I noticed that the passageway for pedestrians only between the Dana Strand Road and Pacific Coast Highway does not bear a name. I would respectfully suggest that this pathway be called Passage des Palmiers. Why such a name? Passage, because it is a passageway. Palmier, because at both ends, as well as along the path, you see palm trees. The day is just a grammatical meaning in French for of thee. Therefore, the name Passage des Palmiers. A name which goes well with all the palm trees that have been recently added to embellish Dana Point. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nancy Jenkins. And Nancy will be followed by Laura Lynn Loynes from our Dana Point Chamber.
Thank you, Mayor and council people. My name is Nancy Jenkins, and I reside in Dana Point. I came before your meeting last time and explained about the Dana Point 5th Marines had a proposal for adopting a Marine for all those Marines and families that are overseas. We're still short a few members, a few civilian members. So if you would like to adopt a single Marine or a Marine with a family back here, we'd love to have you, and all you have to do is go to the Dana Point 5th Marines Support Group website, and there you can sign up. The second thing that the Dana Point 5th Marine is looking forward to is Thanksgiving. Anybody else looking forward to Thanksgiving? Well, we are very fortunate that Stillwater and Mahis is serving Thanksgiving dinners to the Marines and their families that were not deployed. And so we need volunteers, people that would like to help serve the Marines, since it's an all-volunteer dinner. So if anybody is interested, we can also go to the Dana Point 5th Marine website and sign up. So think about what you'll be doing Thanksgiving. I don't know the time frame right now, but I do know that it started about 12 or 1, and it was over about 3 or 3:30. So if you have additional plans, you can probably fit both in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura Lynn Loynes from our Dana Point Chamber of Commerce. And after Laura Lynn will be Ryan Dival.
Good evening. My name is Laura Lynn, and I'm the chair of the Dana Point Chamber of Commerce, representing over 400 business members in and around Dana Point. Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members, and city staff for your dedication and hard work on the Lantern District. Pacific Coast Highway's transition to a two-way highway has been incredibly smooth. Tonight, we are here to ask for your support. We ask our city council members and our community to support the Lantern District businesses, especially the businesses on Del Prado during construction. Lantern District businesses have long supported our community and civic groups, and we ask our citizens to remember these businesses during this time of transition. Additionally, we're asking the council to continue to work together towards the goals of Town Center Plan and to support developments in the Lantern District that enhance the area as a primary business district in the city. We encourage City Council and staff to continue to work with businesses, residents, and developers towards an economically viable downtown that serves both residents and visitors. The Dana Point Chamber of Commerce commends the City Council for their excellent work to date on Lantern District. We look forward to the next phase and working together and welcoming the businesses and development to Dana Point. Thank you for your attention tonight, and we appreciate your partnership between the City Council, city staff, Dana Point Chamber, and our members. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ryan Dival. And after Ryan, we have Joan Hanson.
Good evening, Council, who I see here in front of me, Mayor, public. I just wanted to bring to attention something that's come to light to me recently, and that's the soon-to-be closure of the San Clemente Hospital Emergency Department. I know that quite a few of our Capitol Beach residents in attendance here live within a stone's throw of that emergency department. It's a far closer reach to that than to the Mission Hospital. And with a possible impending closure, it's going to mean an additional travel time for any emergency services. And that additional travel time could be a matter of life or death. So I know that the representatives of Memorial Care have made a nice presentation to the council and a study session for San Clemente. And then I just asked possibly that the current council could reach out to the representatives of Memorial Care for a similar study session for Dana Point and our Capitol Beach residents in particular. While Mission Hospital is quite well renowned for a lot of great, fantastic work, they've been underneath some scrutiny lately. In fact, a lot of their rooms have been closed down due to not passing certain codes. In addition to that, they have been undergoing closures where up to 100 hours a month, almost 3.5 hours a day are closed. So if you get sick, you have to pass right past Mission Hospital and possibly up to Irvine or Laguna Hills or an additional hospital. So this is a big deal to me. And if you're starting to hit up there in those senior years and you're worried about what happens when your chest starts to hurt, it should be a big deal to you as well. So I just ask that our city potentially look into the study session to get better informed about the options that are laid before us in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Joan Hanson.
Madam Mayor?
Joan, are you out there?
She is. Madam Mayor, I think she put public comments, but she really would like to speak on item 12.
Oh, all right.
So if you can just hang on to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, that closes our public comments. We'll now move on to item number 12. And just so we know the process for this particular agenda item, we'll first have a staff report and then questions from the City Council. Then I will open the public hearing. Then the applicant will have 20 minutes for presentation. Then we'll have public comments. And then the applicant will have 10 minutes for rebuttal. Then I'll close the public hearing, and then the council will open up the discussion, and then we'll call for a vote at the end, okay? So if we could have this, excuse me, if we could have the staff report on item 12, please.
Thank you, Mayor Bartlett. What I'd like to do is make a few introductory comments, ask John Tilton to then approach the podium and provide some elevations and a bit of a project overview before we turn it over to the applicant. As council is aware, when this project was first submitted, I was one of its biggest critics from a staff standpoint, because I felt that a lot of work had to be done so that it conformed with the town center plan. And I have to tell you what I thought was important and what needed to be done after that first meeting at the Planning Commission was to have Kyle Butterwick and Boris Dramov come back down and provide an overview to give us a refresher or a Cliff Notes version of what the plan was that the community had adopted and that the Coastal Commission approved at record speed. So having said that, I did something that I typically don't like to do in public meetings, and that's go to the podium and start it off. Because I wanted to see in the room the makeup of the crowd, and I have to tell you, it sort of reflected about what I'm seeing about America. You had 5% on one extreme, 5% on the other, and 90% of the people in the middle just want to figure out what's going on. And the thing I appreciated about that, and looking into the eyes of the people in the crowd and listening to them, was one, they were excited with the effort that was being brought forward with the public improvements. They thought it was looking great, but they wanted to make sure the plan got built as it was approved. And that really resonated with me because a lot of work went into that plan. One of the things that I appreciated even more was that the applicant was in the second or third row with her architect taking notes and making comments and listening to the speakers, but also listening to what Boris and Kyle had to say about their recollection of what was approved in the conceptual plan for Town Center. And so as I began to study the project and follow the project along, as concessions were made, I started seeing a project to morph more into compliance with what was approved. And so I want to thank the applicant, because some developers would have just dug their heels in, and we've seen that happen in the recent past, and it hasn't gotten us anywhere. So I appreciate the applicant's willingness to work and evolve a project with public input and direction from the Planning Commission. And so as this project evolved, what you have before you tonight are two variances. The first variance has to do with, I think, some would say semantics, but when I sat down and started looking at this, one of the things that resonated with me was that when the Town Center plan was approved, it didn't contemplate development that would span from Del Prado to Town Center. And one of the things we have to keep in mind is that alleyway is an easement granted to the city, but it's owned by the property owner. And when I looked at that, they own that pure and simple, and what they're required to do is provide us with an easement so we can service utilities from the back. When I looked at the plan even further, it requires a 40-foot setback from the property line that runs along Del Prado and a property line that runs along PCH. And that setback included a 19-foot first floor with two 11-foot stories above it. That's where the number 3 came with. Question I asked myself was, well, wait a minute, why did they only extend that 40 feet? Why didn't they take that for the depth of the lot? Don't know. But it created an ambiguity or a gray area in the plan that needed to be addressed. So I started looking at it even more. The project was within 40 feet. There is no height variance required here. They're allowed to have rooftop decks, and the reason it's conditional upon a CUP is to make sure that there's a 5-foot setback and the conditions for that rooftop deck are followed as per the plan. Also, I came to find out, because of ADA, in the presence of a rooftop deck, you have to have accessibility for disabled members of our community. And so it allows for elevator to go on the roof without a variance. And that's subject to your discretion as part of a CUP. So having said that, I go back to when I do some of my best work on paper towels. And I grabbed a paper towel in the absence of a piece of paper, and so I sketched it out between PCH and Del Prado, amber and violet. And so you have this section of ground behind the 40-foot setback that doesn't require a 19-foot first floor. So in essence, that's what's great about the process. And the thing I appreciate about the process is there's been complete transparency. Based upon the turnouts that we've had at the public meetings, everybody's had a chance to come and speak, get their feelings known and opinions known for the policymakers. And what I'm looking for is, as this plan evolves, how are the policymakers going to provide me with direction and the community or the development community with how to handle this area that really wasn't contemplated in the plan? Otherwise, you know, if you think about it, if 3 stories was a mandate, then why didn't they extend the 11 feet? I mean, the 19 feet rather, for the entire length of the property as opposed to a 40-foot, only 40 feet. So that's one of the questions we've got to wrestle with. We talk about density. And then I started looking at the type of units that they're putting in here, and I'm sure the applicant will go into that. But if you were to hold them to a strict 30 feet, 3 stories rather, they could probably squeeze in 150, 800 square foot apartments that basically we would have no authority to say no to as long as they could provide parking. So having said that, it's a gray area that we need to come together with and decide how is the plan going to evolve to handle that area. I was pleased when I looked at some of the size of the units. When I first saw this, I said it looks like a dormitory at any UC campus. But then as I see it evolved and I looked at the layouts of some of the units, and I'm sure the applicant will provide those layout sketches, these aren't 800 square foot apartment units. And also I was very pleased to see the public space that articulates throughout it. And I'm sure that the applicant will provide that. So there is no variance for height. What it is, it's a variance to clarify the difference between 3 and 4 stories. The other variance is one for parking, and that's part of the mandate or the direction that the council provided staff as part of the parking management program to create the in-lieu program. And the vehicle for doing that is a variance. And so those are the 2 variances before this city council. So I think it's an important one, and what I really look forward to is getting the direction from the council after you've received public input as to how to deal with that area behind the 40 feet. What's interesting to point out, based upon what I've been able to determine, this development accounts for less than 5% of the total town center area. And the chances, with the exception of the post office area, of it being replicated is very minimal on this type of a scale. So again, this is 5% of the town center, but it's an important part because it's the first project, but it's the one that I'm looking to in a plan that evolves. And all plans evolve, but they evolve to meet the needs and the unique character of the community. So I really appreciate the public discourse. Some say the discourse has been painful, but I think it's been very good in that it has pushed the applicant to make a project that I think is much better than what was originally presented. Having said that, what I'd like to now ask is for John to give an overview of the elevations and talk about it, and then turn it over to the applicant so that they can make their presentation. So John, go ahead.
Thank you, Doug. Mayor, council members, I'm going to give a brief presentation, as Doug has mentioned, give you an overview of the process. When I'm done, I might recommend that rather than asking questions immediately after I'm done, you could have the applicant give a much more detailed explanation of the project, and then that might, in the interest of time, be a little more efficient, but obviously do as you wish. Just to familiarize anyone who doesn't know already, In Town Center, this project is broken up into 3 different sites, or phases as they call them. And Phase 1 is this full block here, which is at Amber Lantern, Del Prado, and PCH. Phase 2 is across the street from Amber Lantern, fronts on PCH and Del Prado and Amber Lantern. And Phase 3 over here, which fronts on Violet Lantern and spans from, again, from Del Prado to PCH. Very briefly here, I don't want to get into too much detail in the interest of time. Obviously, you can ask questions, but Phase 1, it consists of 45 residential units and 13,000 and change in square feet of commercial space. Phase 2 is 32 residential units with 10,200 square feet of commercial space. Phase 3, 32 residential units, 9,000 and change of commercial space, all at the ground level. The total project is the 109 residential units with 32,500 square feet of commercial space, all at the ground level. Planning Commission hearings, we had 4 meetings. July 14th, and again, as we have tonight, approximately 80 people I counted here. There were about 100 people in attendance in July, 35 speakers. We had a study session in August with about 80 people in attendance, 17 speakers. Again, September 8th, 80 people, 10 speakers. And then lastly, on October 6th, we had the public hearing where the Planning Commission voted. It was a split vote of 2-2. And hence, you are seeing this project tonight. Just very briefly, I know there's some questions about the variance for the 4th floor, and I wanted to build a little bit on what Doug had said. Here is a section of Phase 1. It's like you sliced the building down the middle. Sorry about that. And this is PCH, and this is Del Prado. And you'll see here, as it fronts on Del Prado, it is a tall retail space with 2 levels of residential units above. And this is 40 feet of depth minimum of the retail space. On PCH, you have the same condition, fronting retail with 2 units above. Once you go back 40 feet, you've met the minimum standard for the depth of retail space, and you've got all this interior space in which there is where the 4 levels occur. I'll go through each phase separately a little bit just at the ground level. Here is Phase 1, PCH, Amber Lantern, and Del Prado. This is the area that I'm circling right here is all retail space. This is all commercial. This area on Amber Lantern is non-residential. It's mostly open courtyard with some service area and a lobby for the residential area to go up. And then over here, we have fronting on Amber and Del Prado is all retail. Those are the 3-story portions here, and in the middle, you've got 4 levels, which is the variance. In the middle here, there is a paseo. Essentially, it's entries from the streets, which open to a courtyard that is open to the sky, which all the units would look down into. And this is, again, public open space, and it would be conditioned to remain that way. On Phase 2, across the street of Amber Lantern, we have more retail space here, all commercial space, fronting PCH and Amber Lantern. Again, over here, we have commercial space at the ground level, fronting Del Prado and Amber Lantern. The alley is right here, and there's a paseo that opens up to a courtyard. On Phase 3 over at Violet Lantern, again, here we have the 3-story portion and the retail here and here. In this area, although the ground level is our live-work commercial space, there are 4 levels, hence the variance, and the alley is right here. I will go very briefly through the elevations of the project just to show you, and these arrows show the next slides. We'll be looking at the PCH and Amber Lantern elevations. Here's the PCH elevation, the corner, this is Amber Lantern, PCH, and here's the opening to the Paseo and the courtyard that's interior to the project. You'll see it's 1, 2, 3 stories. Fronting on Amber Lantern, you'll see here's PCH. This is 40 feet of depth with 3 stories here, which meets the minimum depth requirement from PCH, and the same on Del Prado. Here's an entry to the parking area, an entry to the courtyard for the public right here, and then on the interior here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. Here next we'll show elevations of Del Prado and the facing up against, this would be the west facing elevation. Here's the Del Prado elevation with an opening to the interior courtyard. You've got 1, 2, 3 levels. And then facing west, you've got, this is 3 levels, 3 levels. This is for the stairway and the elevators. And then here you have on the interior portion 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. Going to phase 2, we'll look at PCH and Amber Lantern. Here's the PCH elevation. Amber Lantern's right here. You look across, there's an opening to a Paseo and a courtyard right here. And then you have all commercial space on the ground level with 2 stories of residential above. And then facing Amber Lantern, here's the 3-story portion, commercial space, 3-story, but in the interior here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4-story. Going to, let's see, the back side, looking at Del Prado and facing the post office. Here's Del Prado, 1, 2, 3 stories. This would be standing at the Schwack and looking right across the street. And then this is be facing the post office parking lot. This is kind of in the background, that's why it's faded out. Here's the entry from the alley, and here we have facing, this is basically where the Shell station is currently. Next, we'll just look at phase 3, and we'll look at these elevations. I'm going to show Del Prado and the backside of this. Quite a few changes occurred over the course of the hearings. They made a lot of changes in response to comments from the Planning Commission and the public. Here's the elevation on Del Prado, commercial space here with 2 levels. There are roof decks, which I neglected to mention on all these projects. They're minimum setback of 5 feet from the edge of the building. Then you're looking at the elevation here. This is actually the back side, which would be facing the post office property. There were a lot of concerns about how this looked, and it's been greatly improved. They've got a setback enough for some landscaping. This would be the Del Prado side. This would be the PCH side. 3 stories here, 3 stories here, but on the interior, 4 stories. Looking at the PCH side, again, this is across the street from here would be the Harbor Cafe. We've got 1, 2, 3 stories, ground floor commercial here, 3 stories, also here, and then here's where we have the 4 levels. All of these units are live-work units, so there's commercial space on the ground level with units above. This is the entry to the alley with some residential units above that. The entitlements they need are a tract map to sell the units as condominiums. There is a coastal development permit for any project of this size in the coastal zone. A site development permit is required for these elevator towers that extend above the height limit. Again, they are allowed, but they're allowed with a site development permit. Also, the roof decks are allowed in the central portion of the couplet. They do, though, require a conditional use permit, and that is for the roof decks. They're also for their guardrails, because the guardrails go up above the height limit 42 inches. Again, it's not a variance, it is a conditional use permit. The variance then is for the 4 stories, and then there is a separate variance, which of course has, as you'll note in your report, requires different findings than a typical variance, and that's to pay in lieu parking fees for 26 spaces. That concludes my presentation. Available for comments. Again, I might recommend that you let the applicant give their presentation. It might fill in some of the gaps if you have any other questions. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we have the applicant present now? You have approximately 20 minutes to present, and then we'll have council questions.
While my architect sets up the PowerPoint, I just want to say my name is Peggy Tabus, Majestic Housing and Development, Newport Beach. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us tonight. On July 14th, we brought a plan to the Planning Commission. We thought it was a good plan. It was 111 units, 30,000 square feet of retail, underground parking. We really felt that that plan met the spirit of the town center specific plan. We found out at that meeting that there were many objections, concerns, issues raised by the community, by the commission. That night, my team and I, we took a lot of notes, and we really listened to some of the issues that maybe we hadn't fully fleshed out up to that point. And we circled back with staff. We spent the next couple of months refining that plan, incorporating a lot of the comments and criticisms and issues that had been raised at that hearing. We conducted 2 workshop sessions. We brought back at each workshop, at each session, we brought back a refined plan with many improvements. And then finally, 2 weeks ago, October 6th, after much collaboration, we had a plan that we felt was far superior to the one that we had introduced in July. One that was really ready for approval by the Planning Commission. It was a result of 3 and 4 months of collaboration with staff, the community, our design team, of course, and I think it really incorporated a lot of the elements that is going to make for a great downtown project. I want to start off by, before I get too far into this, I want to say one thing. There are a lot of parts to this plan. It's a complex mixed-use project, and I know I have 20 minutes, but I think I'm going to find myself having a hard time fitting this presentation in 20 minutes. So I would like permission to go over, if it's okay.
All right.
Thank you. A little bit about Majestic Housing. Contrary to what many people think, we have been here and in the town center for 7 years. We've been active business owners. We own several businesses. We own several properties, have about 20,000 square feet of occupied retail and office space. We have invested a great deal of funds in the community. We brought in 2007 and 8 some fairly dilapidated structures, and we have improved those structures, put in some great tenants, and they know who they are, and we have tried to be a good landlord and a good neighbor, even while we were planning with staff a new project. And we've been working on this plan with staff for maybe 2 or more years. It started with a dialogue. I mean, as many of the staff members, and John in particular, it started off as a dialogue, and it emerged into a project that we are extremely proud of and excited about. I want to start with a little bit of an overview. I know John covered a little bit of this, but the yellow area represents the town center specific plan, which is about 75 acres. The green shaded area is the Lantern Bay Shopping Center, which represents about 10 to 12% of the total specific plan area. And in red are our 3 projects. We have 2.2 acres, or 3% of the town center specific plan area. And as Doug pointed out, it's a small part, but has the potential for creating a tremendous amount of value. Majestic's assemblage is one of 3 ownerships more than 80 feet deep, extending from PCH to Del Prado. Both Doug touched on it as well as John. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to go back. Wrong button. The only other 2 ownerships that would have this 80-foot depth would be the post office property, which is located in here, and what I call the Taco Bell Center, which is located over here. Those are the only 2 other ownerships in town that will have 80 feet or more in depth, that would even have an opportunity to deal with that gray area or that ambiguous area between the commercial 18-foot floor. Our plan. John really covered the primary points, so I don't want to repeat what he said. Some key elements. I consider this really a master plan with 3 sub-phases. And I think that's a good thing, because with a master plan, there's a control. And there's a quality control that you wouldn't get with 3 individual projects. Each plan phase comprises residential, retail, open space, ocean view, roof deck, and subterranean parking. We have the 109 condos and the 32,000 square feet of retail. Some have said that this project is too big, and I would disagree with that. I think this project is exactly the right size, and I'll tell you why. With a project of this size, like I said, there's quality control. With the implementation of development standards, which are now a condition of approval if you elect to approve tonight, you can be assured that the quality in phase 1 will be carried through to the quality in phase 3, despite what could happen to Majestic or the economy along the way. Secondly, architectural compatibility. When you have projects side by side, there's a possibility that there's a mishmash. This one's vision of what it looks like, and this one's interpretation of what it should look like. In this case, we can control the architecture and we control the street scene better. We have elected to make phase 1 and phase 2 of similar architecture, and to create a neighborhood within a neighborhood around Amber Lantern, which would be newly redesigned with the angled parking. Phase 3 would be take the same form and massing, but with a different color and material palette, different window treatments, to create a more varied street scene. Critical mass. With a project of this size, you actually get the critical mass you need to create the kind of vibrant retail and residential town center that I think everybody is looking for. And finally, you get the kind of amenities that only a development of this size can provide. Individually, I can't give you the active courtyards and the public open spaces. But collectively, I can arrange my units, I can balance my retail, and I can provide the community benefit, which in this case is a significant open space component. Sorry, this is a little unused to it. Just a quick recap of some of the changes that we've made since July. Sorry, a little fast. One, we did redesign phase 2 to eliminate any need for height variances. We are not asking for a height variance this evening. This, by the way, is a rendering taken from Del Prado looking down Amber Lantern. The Schwack is on the foreground on the right. We have converted private courtyard spaces to public spaces, and by public, that means that they will be open to the public during business hours, closed at night for the privacy and the safety of our residences. And that is a 18,200 square foot of land area. It's now 19% of our project is open space available for the public. You don't even have to buy a condo, and you still get access to our property. So we are very proud of that this is a stunning opportunity for the city. I don't think there's another project that will come before the city council in the town center district that can provide this kind of open space. We added 40 underground parking spaces, and we reduced the need to purchase off-site spaces from 63, which is our original plan, down to 26. We added a few thousand square feet of retail, which is why 63 less 40 equals 26. We added dedicated loading spaces on the lantern streets and the alleys for each phase. Basically, we handled the day-to-day living and shopping and servicing of a mixed-use project in a downtown. We now have spaces dedicated for moving in, residential move-ins, for commercial services. We have back of the house and off-sidewalk service and trash handling. We enhanced the alley paving and added 4 new spaces on Phase 2's alley. We think that alley paving is going to be tremendous and hopefully will be carried through to the rest of the block. It actually opens up, it makes our courtyard look twice as big as it actually is. And then we reworked each and every elevation of all 3 buildings to ensure that all sides will be fully articulated. Nobody can say that this looks like a dorm. Nobody can say that with a straight face. Each side, we have looked at color and form and massing to create what we think is no backside. We have no backside. Everything is front side. It looks like a series of townhomes rather than monolithic structures. We added new materials and elements, particularly at the street level, to enhance the pedestrian shopping experience. We reduced the number of elevators from 6 to 3. This is the minimum number needed for ADA and fire department compliance. And we've changed the materials of those elevators to make them less obtrusive. They'll now be non-reflected glass with very light materials, hardly noticeable. We made, at the Planning Commission hearing on the 6th, there were a couple of comments from 2 of the commissioners. Was there enough retail on Amber Lantern? Was there enough connectivity between Coast Highway and Del Prado? We kind of looked at that, and we show this, the red areas shows all of our retail. What we've done since the Planning Commission hearing is we have redistributed some of the retail on Coast Highway and Del Prado into niche retail spaces along Amber Lantern. Of course, Violet Lantern, we have the live work units up and down, which is in fact the retail / office space. So we had already met the connectivity issue. I think now that you can see with color, we have very balanced retail project. It's a balance of retail and residential. I want to highlight some of the things about our courtyards that I didn't say before. These are very active courtyards. A lot going on. We have the opportunity to create courtyard dining on these corners, and on these corners, and on these corners. We have the opportunity for lounging. We have a water feature. We have landscaping. Public art will be located in these courtyards. We will be potentially having art exhibits and displays and maybe school programs. There's so many opportunities to bring the public and the shoppers into this community. We're very excited about some of these opportunities that we are presenting tonight. In moving around some of the retail, I also want to point out that we're creating some outdoor living rooms, what I call outdoor lounge areas on PCH and Del Prado around the paseos up here and on the corners down here. These will be, and I'll show you what I'm thinking, this will be something along the lines of what we're thinking. These are just extra spaces for hanging out, people watching. And they'll give, the sidewalk will look a little bit bigger and have enough room for some real chairs and table space. The niche retail that we were thinking about on Amber Lantern, maybe a flower stand, maybe a little coffee bar. I want to talk a little bit about merchandising tonight, and I think one of the things I failed to do in some of the other presentations is really describe to you our retail vision. I mean, this is a big part of this project is retail. And in order to have a very successful center, it's going to take the right blend of shops and restaurants and services to create that excitement and to create that dynamic place, the place that you all want to go and where visitors to Dana Point want to go. It's very quick. I'm sorry, there's the quickest thing. There. Right? Okay. Restaurants and dining. We think that the downtown needs some really good quality sit-down restaurants, night on the town, some farm-to-table, local sourced food, some fusion restaurants. There's one, I happen to know the owner in San Clemente looking for a space, Hapa J's, Hawaiian Surfer Fusion. We're looking for the quality of a quality of restaurant that's going to attract not only the neighborhood and the local community, but those from some of the hotels. We think the downtown center can't be vibrant without some clothing and fashion. Tommy Bahama's Urban Outfitters are just examples of the kinds of tenants that we think we can attract. And finally, the downtown can have a place where you can actually buy your blue jeans locally, buy your shoes locally. I've asked around, and everybody's telling me that they're shopping at the mall or in Laguna Beach. It's the time that we get some fashion and some down in the downtown area. Some more examples, J. Crew, shoes. I think, any female knows there's never enough shoe stores. The niche retail to activate amber. I think these images show exactly what we had in mind. The magazine or book stand on the way, it could also sell, beach stuff or Christmas ornaments at Christmas time or pumpkins at Halloween. The flower stand, those niches that we're creating along the side streets could have so much opportunity. By the way, in creating these extra little niches, we have not added to our retail space. We have just merely redistributed, so parking is still accommodated. The gourmet coffee spot, the local hangout. We want to make sure that we have, whether it's a regional or a local coffee guy, we want to have at least one of those. We want to have those in one of our courtyards. We want to provide for those who have dogs, so you can walk your dog down and have coffee. The bakery. We need a bakery in downtown. That's got to be part of the mix. There's no place to buy a baguette or a croissant or a bagel right now. We want to have that. And then, of course, we want to provide those spaces for the unique local tenants that are going to add the Dana Point vibe to this center. The antique store, the interior design store, the bead store, the art gallery, whatever. We will have room for that because that's what makes this retail center Dana Point and not just anybody else's retail center. The toy store, we got to get the stroller crowd down here. We need toy stores and we need clothing stores, juice bars, art galleries. And I think it's a successful retail center is kind of that special recipe. You take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and together, and it's a creative venture. We're going to be pioneering a bit, but this is a project that we're taking. This is a visionary project. It's a leap of faith on our part, and it'll be the leap of faith to actually bring together this kind of dynamic center. I want to talk a little bit about the residential side. We hired Myers Research to do a market study for us last year, and they have identified a target buyer that is primarily a move-down buyer, empty nester, looking for a beach-close urban experience. They are looking for open, high-quality, mid-sized to larger units, which is why we have provided such large units in our plan. They want boating, golfing, dining, and shopping all together. Well, Dana Point has great boating opportunities. Golfing, there are plenty of courses in the vicinity, and we want to provide the dining and shopping components. The Southern Californians, they are going to want private roof decks. It's going to be part of the, you know, a luxury condo, they want a private roof viewing deck. Secured covered parking, we have that as well. We're expecting average prices to be approximately $600,000, but we think that the views from the upper floors will command some significant premiums. We have a wide variety of floor plan types, a wide variety. It's almost I would call it semi-custom. 30 or more floor plans in 109 units, each one designed to fit specially into this part of the building. Most of our units are two-bedroom, 87%, but we have a small 4% of one-bedrooms and 9% three. The units go all the way up to 2,100 square feet. At the top, that's a three-bedroom den, two-balcony unit of 2,100 square feet. It's like a house without the maintenance. Down below in the corner on the left is a one-bedroom, kind of trapezoidal shape, great living space, large living area with a large balcony. In the center is the closest thing we have to a standard unit. It's a two-bedroom, two-bath, two master suites, oversized, 1,250 square feet. And on the end, units that I'm kind of excited about, we only have 7 of them, 7 live-work units. We're providing 1,300 square feet of living space above and a 1,200 square foot workspace below. Those workspaces could be anything from art gallery, architectural office, insurance office, real estate broker, somebody who designs purses, clothing and accessory shop. 7 units, we think that they will be well received. At this point, I wanted to, because we had been asked and we've provided a computer model to show how our project will look in the context of downtown. And what we've done is, in the course of designing this project, we've created this model to kind of understand space and form and plan. And I hope I'm in the middle of it, so I'm...
Could move on the other side, just move the microphone over and stand on the other side.
Just stand here, you'll be fine.
There, right there. If I'm in the way, just tell me. So what we did was we took the model and we dropped it into a Google Earth image, which is an accurate depiction of the downtown streets and topography and existing buildings. And we wanted you to see how that fit in while I am showing you the articulated elevations next door. Now, a massing model is not a fully delineated model. It's exactly what it says. It shows form and mass. That's it. It gives you some kind of context, though, to see how these buildings look. And let's start, Mike, with phase 1, zooming in on the Coast Highway elevation, which is at the top of the screen to your right. You know, John has already gone through all these elevations. I'm not going to bore you again, but I want to tell you that this was our goal, and this is what we're providing, is we've used color and form and step backs and pop outs and materials to create what looks like little individual townhomes marching down the street rather than long monolithic condo buildings. We have really paid attention to the scale and at the pedestrian level as well as at the overall level. And I think if you look at these elevations in the context of that model, you can understand better what we're trying to accomplish. As John pointed out, that's our west elevation of phase 1, which, you know, in 10 years may never even be seen, but we're paying attention to the details today. And we have landscaped it, we have created the forms and the massing so that it looks like not one giant building, but a series of smaller buildings. The same goes for the south elevation on Del Prado. Not one giant building, but maybe 5 segments of buildings as you march down the street. As I said before, phase 2 architecture is the same as phase 1. It was a conscious decision to create that little neighborhood. Phase 3 is where we kind of move around to Phase 3, where we deviate from that color palette and go to something in the beiges, but still using that same idea of form and massing and setbacks and pop-outs to make this look like a series of townhomes rather than a long monolithic building. If anybody later has any questions or wants to see the model in more detail, we'd be happy to show that. But I wanted to move on and get to the fourth floor variance request and the in lieu fee issue. We heard one of the commissioners mention along the way that just follow the rules. You must follow the rules. And I've heard others say that as well. Well, one thing about a variance, it is part of the rules. There's a rule in the code, there's a provision for a variance. If there's a unique property configuration, size, or topography, some kind of unique situation that warrants additional look and additional consideration, it calls for a variance. It is in part of the rules. In this particular case, Majestic Properties is one of 3 ownerships in the town center that extends from PCH to Del Prado. It creates this unique situation in between, an ambiguity, if you will. To limit our internal buildings to 3 stories would unfairly add cost, as we would try to adjust from the 18th down to the 11-foot plate height and back up again. It would add a significant amount of construction costs as we tried to meet ADA requirements, a lot more ramping and stepping. We are not asking for additional height. We would be the same if we're within the 40-foot envelope. Our roof deck elevators would be at the same height. We are not adding any impacts for traffic, noise, views, air quality. None of that results from the 4th floor. And in fact, this project is designed with the 4th floor, with the balance of the building and the open space, and the retail and the residential, is allowing us to provide an amenitized public courtyard for the community that if any of the other projects that will come before you can do. This will be a very unique opportunity. It is not about densification. We are not more dense than any project that is in the queue right now that is fully compliant and 3-story. For example, the Union Bank proposal down the street on Golden Lantern. It's 3 stories, but its density on a residential unit per acre basis is 64 to the acre. We're at 49.5 to the acre. In other words, we are 29% less dense than the Union Bank project, which is compliant. We are 24% less dense on a unit per acre basis than what I would call the Bates Motel property. I'm sorry to refer to it that way, but that seems to be the only way anybody knows what I'm talking about. That project is at 61 units per acre. And in terms of floor area ratio, 2.5, we are within the 2.5 ratio. This is not about adding density. It's about manipulating space. It's about working within a volume of 40-foot high volume. We have a balance of residential use, retail use, and open space. 19% of our space, by the way, is open space. We have, as you can see from the rendering, 3-story height view from on Del Prado. We're at the schwack on the right. You can't even tell, looking down the street, that there's 4 stories there. I suppose if you really wanted to, and you walked down to the alley and you really wanted to study our project, and you really wanted to say, aha, there's a 4th floor, you could. But it won't be perceived, because if you look at the right roof lines, it's all the same height. And again, John showed this slide, but this is our slide to show where on the buildings their 4th floor actually exists. The in lieu parking fee. The town center specific plan contemplated an in lieu parking fee. It's really a technicality that it rises to the level of variance. planning director has explained this to me several times, and I'm still not 100% sure I understand. But nevertheless, I went back to the specific plan, and I noticed policy 4.1, provide opportunities for shared parking facilities. I'm not going to bore you with reading the rest of it, but there would be an establishment of an off-street parking district. Policy 4.5, create an in lieu parking program which includes appropriate fees. We are implementing a policy statement from the Town Center Specific Plan. The city's recent parking study by Nelson Nygaard, the experts, conclude the downtown has a significant excess of parking spaces at all times. They describe the parking solution for Dana Point as not one of supply, but one of management. And then lastly, on this point, not to beat a dead horse, but staff, as I'm aware, has already identified potential opportunities for public parking, for additional public parking, very close proximity to phase 2 and 3 of our project. I might also add, that's not on the slide, we've been conditioned to have those spaces, any space we need in any given phase, identified before we can get a C of O on any retail space. Phase 1 needs 8 spaces of off-site parking, phase 2 needs 0, and phase 3 needs 18. The reason phase 3 needs so many is because of our live-work units. The work units require parking at the same level as any restaurant or retail space. And so that's where out of the 26, the bulk of our in lieu parking spaces come from that component. Financial contributions. I want to mention some of this is a 3% of the town center area that can provide tremendous value way beyond its size. Impact fees and property tax revenue bears talking about. We will be paying $3.3 million in impact and building fees to the community for the benefit of the community. A little over $1 million of that goes directly to the city of Dana Point. $390,000 will be paid to the city of Dana Point for the in lieu parking spaces. And then, in addition to that, tax revenue per year to Dana. That's just a 14% share of the county taxes. We will be producing at build-out $140,000 to $200,000 per year. As a point of reference, our projects today, based on the current valuation, we are paying to the city of Dana Point $17,500 per year. So we'll be increasing our payments in the form of property taxes by tenfold. The fee breakdown is below. Just the line items bolded are fee payments directly to the city. Del Prado and PCH improvements, $561,000 will be paid towards reimbursement of the monies already expended for the PCH and Del Prado improvements. There are a series of other fees, school fees, $501,000. I mean, that's a significant contribution to the school district, not to be appreciated. Local parks and art and public places, we've elected to provide open space rather than pay local park fee. And art and public place, we think that it would be much better for our project to have the art in our project than to pay you I think the $140,000 we would have to pay. So in total, about $1 million in fees to the city of Dana Point, plus a significant amount of tax revenue. In conclusion, and I'll get off the podium in a second, I just want to summarize and say that I strongly believe that this project incorporates all the concepts and elements that was envisioned in the Town Center Specific Plan. No, I wasn't there, but I've heard and I've listened and I've read. We have high-quality retail development. We have many opportunities for a healthy mix of shops and restaurants at local, regional, and national tenants. We have architecture and landscaping that is rich in detail and materials. Just look at our buildings and our courtyards. Public open spaces for gathering that are interesting and usable. High-quality residential units in a wide variety of unit types. We've got that. Underground parking, alley upgrades, and new and improved Lantern Street parking and street scene. This project will be the catalyst for a new and vibrant town center, And tonight, I appreciate, I respectfully request that you approve this project and act in where the Planning Commission couldn't 2 weeks ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll open it up to questions from the council. Who would like to begin? Carlos, questions?
Yes. The applicant touched on this, as I already had this listed in my remarks to ask the staff, and it considers parking and the policies in our town center plan on page 18, where it talks about the goal and the policies, section 4. So the simple question is, it says create a 4.4, create a parking development and management program which assesses parking demand and requirements based on the Dana Point zoning code. What is the status of our parking plan?
Ursula, can you or John?
We went to the council and the planning commission in a joint study session earlier this year. I believe it was in January. And after that, it took us 6 months to get a meeting with Coastal Commission staff. We met with them to present that same report that was presented to both the city council and the planning commission. And we're dialoguing with them regarding some of those recommendations and policies. Ultimately, it would require a town center plan amendment to implement some of those recommendations and policies.
Is there an estimate on completion of that or approval? I know you can't guess what the Coastal Commission is going to do, but.
You know, it's one of those things where, again, we're working with the Coastal Commission, and we did that on the front end with the town center plan development. Once we identify their specific concerns and we can modify the plan per those concerns, we'll then come back and have a series of public meetings to get public input at the Planning Commission level, I would imagine, and then to the City Council because it will involve an LCPA. And our hope is that we can, my hope is that we can do this in the next 12 months. And I say that to be conservative because, again, we're dealing with the Coastal Commission and they have an impacted work log. So, again, I don't have any control over the assignment of the priorities, but as Ursula indicated, it took us 6 months from the time we requested to get a meeting to talk about this. Fortunately, what we're trying to do is model the program that was developed in San Clemente that the Coastal Commission approved and liked. So hopefully we have more things in common and more things they like to see to expedite it. But I would hope that within another 12 months we'll have an LCPA ready to be submitted. It could be sooner, but I just can't control the Coastal Commission with regard to workload.
Understand that. Thank you very much. My second question, in the town center plan on page 31, it's talking about maximum building height. And it gives a table, besides a picture, of maximum building height, and talks about maximum height, which has been discussed tonight already at 40 feet. And then it has two annotations. I'd like some clarification on the first annotation, which says, count 2 levels of above-grade parking as a single story when fronted by a single story of retail space not exceeding 20 feet in height. What would be the ultimate height? How many floors would that be by the time you get done?
Ursula or John, could you respond for me?
I can answer that. That would be 4 stories.
4 stories. Would that require a variance?
No.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. Why don't we open up to public comments at this time? Okay, and Joan Handsome, you are our very first speaker. I'm going to have everyone queue up. We have quite a few speakers this evening. Our next speaker will be Catherine Schenk, followed by Terry Walsh and Karen Modero. You could please state your name and city of residence before you speak. Thank you.
My name is Joan Hanson, and I live here in Dana Point. I think the project that you've all been considering is a very exciting project. However, there are things that brought to my mind that I would like to share with all of you. And so some of the things that I'd like you to consider are the building height of the new usable roof deck space, plus the extension of the additional elevator towers. Some loss of the ocean views of the harbor and waves, plus the shoreline to homeowners on the surrounding hills. Invasion of privacy views to homes on the ocean side behind commercial area. I am concerned too about the parking problems greatly increased by each extra housing units, some now with extra floor space, needing 4 spaces to serve a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom and den. So in other words, you need 4 spaces of parking for each one of the bedrooms or den where people can be sleeping. Also, that's with your adults, but then with driver's license and each owning their own car, or you would have your future youth coming in and they reach the age of requirement at a later time, but they're living in the housing unit, and so now they are old enough to get a car, and so that's going to take more parking space. Then you do need to have some commercial employees and customers parking spaces available on the first level or underneath. But these are things that we need to consider for the future. Also, the roof decks on the top of the building could provide space and elevator transportation for large roof parties and increased noise for neighbors and businesses. Also, it could greatly increase the need for additional city police duty. The problems with the taller housing buildings could help to overpopulate downtown city area, and that's requiring more city services. Thank you.
I think you have 30 seconds, is that correct?
Yes.
Right, you still have 30 seconds.
Okay.
We give you a warning signal first.
Okay, thank you. Problems with the taller housing buildings could help to overpopulate downtown city area, requiring more city services for drains, electrical outlets, and water use. And it might be helpful to check height limits and public services needed with Newport Beach and Laguna Beach City Council's members, plus some of the problems confronting them at their meetings in order to avoid pitfalls our city might develop later. They too are beach cities that take great pride in residential and commercial developments. And so I was thinking about our future in the city and all of the different demands that might be needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Catherine Schenk.
Hello, my name is Catherine Schenk. I live in Capistrano Beach, and I am concerned about the parking. Since Pacific Coast Highway was reconfigured, a lot of the parking spaces, both going north and south, have disappeared, and I'm just afraid that there's going to be over-parking in the downtown. Apparently, the 21 guest parking spaces that were supposed to be provided have been taken away. So guests to these various condominiums are going to be parking on the street. And I just think this is a problem that should be dealt with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Terry Walsh.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council and staff. My name is Terry Walsh, resident of Dana Point. I did serve on the Town Center Subcommittee, and we made a lot of recommendations to the city which were approved. There's been a lot of discussion over this project about what we contemplated and what we did not contemplate, and therefore these variances are okay. One of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about was the building height. And we were persuaded by Boris to go from 35 to 40 feet for the one reason and one reason only, and that was to get a better first floor retail look of 18 feet, pardon my voice. But we limited it to 3 stories, and my concern is the 4 stories. So thank you again.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karen Modero.
I live on Amber Lantern, in the heart of what will be going on if this project goes through. I'm of the demographic that would be interested in a high-end condo in a downtown setting, but I would never consider the Majestic units unless there was on-site parking for at least 2 vehicles. The choice not to provide adequate parking automatically downgrades this cornerstone project to apartment-style living. As a resident, it scares me to death to talk about approving this project until the parking plans and things that we hear are in the works are settled. The risk is so high. I also wonder, what about the slippery slope? If you grant them the opportunity to build without having adequate parking, what do you say to the next developer that comes through that wants to do the same thing? The Town Center parking study that was created in early 2008 noted that between 146 and 617 parking spaces would be needed within 10 years. We are now approaching year 6 of that projection. And already on Amber Lantern, the spillover from Del Prado and PCH crowd my street. And this is without having permanent residents and their guests parking their vehicles there. A number of years ago, my husband and I applied for a permit to build an elevator and were denied by the city until we could prove that we could install it without losing a garage space, because they didn't want permanent residential parking on city streets. There was wisdom in that, and I wonder what has changed. The codes and ordinances of our city are the terms of a covenant between the residents and our elected officials. Variances are meant to allow for minor common sense adjustments. They were never meant to fundamentally change the character of a community, as this project would do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next 4 speakers, Bill McCormick, followed by Donna Berger, then Bruce Stout, and then Sandy Iverson. Please state your name and city of residence.
Bill McCormack. I live in Newport Beach, but I am a property owner here in Dana Point. I own the property where the Killer Dana Surf Store is located. It's just across the street from Phase 3 of the Majestic project. Our Killer Dana store faces Del Prado, and if any of you have this map, you can see that we're facing Del Prado, one building, and we're facing Violet Lantern with another office and retail building. I'm very concerned about the parking. I've been observing this parking situation for 35 years, and as owner there. Just in the last couple of years, we lost 3 parking spaces to comply with the handicap regulations. And we lost a 4th parking space because we had to widen our driveway to comply with handicap requirements. We lost a 5th and 6th space because the city painted the curbings red to make no parking zones on both sides of the alleyway that's going to be bridged over with this project. So we're in a kind of a real dangerous situation right now with parking there on the Phase 3 Violet Lantern Street. Majestic has explained that the largest number of in-lieu spaces needed are on Violet Lantern. Amber Lantern has the least amount. And that's because we have wide driveways, older properties with wide driveways, the alleyway with red zones painted on both sides. And when we now grant in lieu parking, more of it, in this area, we're really, I think, asking for a problem without a plan. And almost a year ago, the proposal was set forth. And you folks, please, let's get the plan, the parking plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Donna Berger.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, applicants, and fellow citizens of Dana Point. Previously, when John from the Planning Commission was showing us slides, kind of giving a summary of the meetings and the attendees and the number of speakers, I wrote down that with all of those meetings, the total number of attendees comes out to 340 people. That's not even those who spoke, it's just the people who attended. Now let's think about the population in the city of Dana Point. The bottom line, and I've said this before at previous meetings, is many people who care about this come home, they have kids to feed, soccer games, they're not here. But I want the council to know that the buzz around Dana Point does express concern about the height of the building, and I would really like to assure everyone involved in this process that we do understand that it's not just a rule for a rule's sake. We're a pretty smart group of people, and we do understand what a variance is and when and why we would choose to use one. People are very concerned about the height. There are people who have lived here for many, many years whose views are going to be very negatively impacted or gone altogether. I know we have a lot of speakers, so I'm just going to say a few more things. People are concerned still about the aesthetic. They think it looks urban when they look at the elevations, that it could be a little bit more unique. And then just to wrap up, I just really want to implore the council not to reverse the decision of the Planning Commission. Since the project is going to be here for so many years, I think it makes a lot of sense to just give us a little bit more time to make sure that ultimately what we come up with reflects the concerns and the spirit of our citizens and the spirit of our community. We're almost there. And the process may be frustrating, but it's been a really good one. So again, I implore you not to reverse the decision. I think the fact that the Planning Commission couldn't come to an agreement is not because of an inability, but because of wisdom on their part. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bruce Stout.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Stout, 30-year resident of Dana Point. Just two factors that I haven't heard expressed before are, in addition to the parking problems, if there are going to be homeowners living in this project, where do they store their equipment that they go to the beach with? Surfboards, scuba equipment, all that, and will they then take some of their parking spaces and use that for storage? So is there on-site storage for that stuff? Is there going to be more storage provided elsewhere in town, down in the marina, for instance? And then the other thing is one of the advantages we have in Dana Point is not only the ocean views, but the ocean breezes. And I wouldn't consider living in any unit that didn't have wide open windows and doors where you could enjoy that year-round. And then also, late in the afternoon, our ocean breezes get stronger. Are we going to have wind tunnels through these courtyards? Looking at the courtyards tonight, they seemed fine. They are more open than they were in previous presentations, and there's more landscape, but those ocean breezes are something that should be taken advantage of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Sandy Iverson. And then following Sandy, we have the next 4 speakers, Carl Iverson, Herb Huig, Chuck Rathbone, and Kirsten Reynolds.
Good evening, Council. Sandy Iverson, Capistrano Beach. My concern tonight, first of all, I'd like to say to Peggy and her group, I do appreciate some of the aesthetics that have greatly improved since we started this in July. We've come a ways. But my concern is how this project was presented back in July. It's seemingly like the city planning department just gave a carte blanche on a silver tray to this developer because the first plan was so bad, but yet everything was fine. You can have all your height variances, you can have your roof decks. There were so many things that were just kind of given to them by the planning department that shouldn't have ever gone forward to begin with. My husband's an architect. He deals a lot with coastal towns. And if he came up with a plan that exceeded the zoning codes and the variances, they would have said no right away, go back and redesign it. But that wasn't the case here. It's like, are we so desperate to get a project in this town started that will just hand the developer anything? The parking on the Nelson Nygaard study, that needs to be redone. That was done before Coast Highway became two-way, and we lost many parking spaces on there. So let's get another parking plan going, another estimate of what parking we actually do have now, because I don't feel there's an extra 600 spaces once we get all these new projects going in. The part of that town center plan is kind of getting disregarded. A couple of the commissioners at the Planning Commission said that they felt it was almost obsolete. Ms. Reynosa has gone to association meetings, and she says the thinking now is that mixed use is no longer really important and no longer working. But we have a town center specific plan that took millions of dollars to develop and many, many community hours from residents to help develop. And yet now the planning department is saying it's obsolete. Does that mean that Roma's designs and their plans were also obsolete and we don't need to pay them anymore? I just ask that we not rush this through and pay attention to the problems here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carl Iverson.
Good evening. Carl Iverson, Cabo Beach. Well, she pretty much covered a lot of things that I wanted to cover, but she does that a lot. I came here really to talk about the variances, and after listening to the conversations tonight and what's been presented, I think the biggest issue is we still have the 4-story variance issue, but more than that, I think, is the parking variances. There really is not a plan in place as to how to satisfy this at all. I have been to every planning commission meeting on this project throughout its whole process, and I would like to compliment Peggy and her staff for actually coming up with a better project. Every time we have made them come back, the project has gotten better. I can appreciate that, and I respect that. One comment I would like to make, they have provided this plaza area within Phase 1, which I think is a real plus, but they're gating it. They're closing it at night. Well, here we are, back on the Strand issue again, closing the beach at night. I mean, the city's in litigation about this and has been for some time. Maybe we could avoid that particular issue with the plazas. Eliminate the gates. Let it be open. Tonight, I come to you folks humbly asking you to just think closely as what's happening here. This is a precedent-setting issue if variances are granted. I would like to ask that you request the city legal staff to come up with kind of a kind of a risk management appraisal of what precedents are being set in here and what doors are going to be opened down the road for other developers. I mean, is the city opening itself to litigation? Let the legal counsel give you a written report. Let us all know what is involved in this. The second thing I'd like to ask you folks is maybe not render a decision on this tonight. When the hotel project came in front of you, Councilman Weinberg suggested, let them come back again with some of these things fixed. I mean, they can get rid of these variances, and the one I am primarily concerned about, although the 4 stories is precedent setting, is the parking. The parking is going to be an issue immediately. The parking is going to be an issue worse 10 years down the road. And as been mentioned earlier, when that Nygaard study was done, that was prior to all of the parking spaces on the Coast Highway being eliminated. That parking study should be updated before we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Herb Hewig.
Good evening, council members. My name is Herbert Hewig. I live on Blue Lantern Street, and my house is on the lower part of Blue Lantern. My view, which I paid for dearly, just skims over the top of this area that we're talking about up there, where the original 35-foot height limitation. And by the way, I was listening to KFI radio a couple of months ago, and they said the height limitation in Hollywood is 35 feet. Maybe we should remember that they had a lot of pressure there, and they stuck it out. Well, we got 40 feet here. And my recollection after going to those meetings was that they said, well, we got to have more height on that first floor. So we'll just let it go up a little bit. I didn't hear anything about adding another whole floor in there because there was space to do it. They said we got to have 18 feet for the first floor, even though many people got up and said, I'm building commercial structures with 13 feet, and I don't have any trouble renting them. So I'm just really concerned that we gave 40 feet so a certain thing could be accomplished. And what it has accomplished is they're sticking another floor in there. These are massive projects. And there's 3 of them. Why don't we take the smallest one first and work on that and see where we're going? But this thing is massive. And the community, well, we're not all here. The ones who really feel like I do, concerned about this. So we've been sitting here waiting. I didn't get any variances on my house when I needed them or would have liked to had them. I had to go by the rules. And when you go down the street, there's a sign that says how fast you go. Nobody can go faster than that. And that's a variance you're telling people you don't have to abide by the rules. Do what you want to do. Oh, but there are other people have to live with the rules, but not you. Anyhow, I would like you to say no for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Chuck Rathbone.
Good evening, Chuck Rathbone, resident of Dana Point. The area I really want to focus in on is back on the variance. Well, excuse me, I'd like to compliment Majestic. They have done a very good job in listening to the public and coming back and making changes. I think they made a major progress, but in my opinion, it's still not quite there. And the reason it's not there is because I do believe that the variance issue is still a key issue. I think the town center plan was done by some people still here that participated, and they spent a lot of time in looking at the different options, I believe. And Councilman Olvera, you saw page 31 talks about the height. It says 40 feet and, the key word is and, 3 stories. So, and there was no exceptions notated in that town center plan. So I think to think that people didn't think about different alternatives, I think is not fair to those who have spent a lot of time. But if we look back at that variance again, it does talk about, when we talk about variances, we're talking about hardships, legal hardships, not financial hardships. I think Majestic talked about it's going to cost some more. Well, I understand that. It's all about economics. But the council is there to represent the people that in the city. And although this isn't full house, I think you've heard from a number of people throughout the community that they are concerned about variances. And because it also, if you approve this, it's 4 stories today, and it's a variance. But what's going to happen tomorrow? Who's coming in next who's going to say, well, you know, maybe I think this should have been this, because I don't think the people that developed the town center plan really quite understood my circumstances. So you're establishing, I believe, some precedents if you approve it as is. I think it still needs some work, but that's the part that really concerns me, is that today it's this, and tomorrow someone else may come along and say, I don't like this part of the plan. I think they didn't understand what I was trying to say. So I would just ask that you consider what the impact this could be if this decision is, the Planning Commission's decision is denied, and that you go forward with the Majestic. I would ask that you uphold the Planning Commission's position, and that Majestic can do a little bit more in that particular area and come back with a project that is even better than it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kirsten Reynolds. Then after Kirsten, it'll be approximately 8 o'clock. We're going to take a 10-minute break until 10 after 8 after Kirsten speaks.
Kirsten Reynolds, Dana Point, Town Center Subcommittee member. The approved Town Center plan stipulates a maximum building height of 40 feet and 3 stories. The subcommittee's intention was always the pairing of these 2 requirements and not as line item design options. The plan clearly defines the intention of this requirement in written, illustrated, and photographic terms. The TCP land use section states the goal is to achieve development in the town center area that enhances the area as a primary business district in the city. The developer is creating a residential land use priority. With the increase in residential units along Amber Lantern and Violet Lantern comes a decrease in retail, restaurant, and business services available to the pedestrian. Policy 1.9 states, retail service commercial and visitor service commercial uses are priority uses. Policy 2.4, encourage pedestrian-oriented building frontages with shops opening to the public sidewalk and encourage a maximum amount of retail uses on the first floor. Policy 2.5, through effective design guidelines, encourage building designs, intensity, and setbacks to be compatible with the desired scale and character of the area. The subcommittee never intended for the Lantern Cross Streets to be excluded in the pedestrian-friendly experience of the couplet, as has been inferred by others. In fact, the TCP retail frontage all other streets section states, retail and similar active frontage should be built near the property or setback line, and primary entrances should face the sidewalk. The plan also highlights the criticality of circulation links. Amber Lantern and Violet Lantern have been designated as links to scenic overlooks. Due to this linkage, the land use and building elevations on these cross streets should provide functions that support a pedestrian-friendly experience rather than the inactive nature created as a result of the proposed residential use. Our residents deserve a better pedestrian experience on these cross streets. All must be reminded that the goal of the Town Center plan was to achieve development in the Town Center area that would enhance the area as a primary business district while providing a pedestrian-friendly environment. All of the planning commissioners who originally unanimously approved the Town Center plan are active today in either a commissioner or council member position. The city manager, city architect, planning manager, and director of public works hold the same positions they did during the creation of the Town Center plan. The hired urban design firm, Roma, is still retained by the city, with plans to design Doheny Village. The only staff positions that have changed since the approved plan are the director of community development and the senior planner. As is evident with the leadership involved, the Town Center plan was not created and approved by a select group of residents over a casual cup of coffee at the harbor. I urge you to uphold the Town Center plan as approved by the subcommittee, Planning Commission, City Council, and Coastal Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we're going to take a break until 10 after 8. Thank you. I'd like to mention that Councilmember Scott Schoeffel, as you can see, is absent this evening. He has an excused absence. He is on business for the Transportation Corridor Agency in New York today, so that's why he's not with us. Okay, our next four speakers, we have Andrew Zimbaldi, Sue Osborne, Trent Hoffenberger, and Betty Hill. Again, please state your name and city of residence before you begin. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Zimbaldi. I live in Newport Beach, California, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the owners of Lantern Bay Village Shopping Center, which is an integral part of the town center plan and has been for many years. The owners asked me to come tonight and speak for them and tell you how much they appreciate the very hard work you, the City Council, the Planning Commission, all of the planning staff have put in to making that plan what it is today. And it is a really great plan, and it's so neat to see all of the street improvements going in and all that goes with that plan starting to be implemented. The next step in that plan is to get actual development to happen. And I think this is the first project that can make that a reality. And it's really, really difficult for the way the ownership of the lots in Dana Point along the major streets occurs. It's all very small, fragmented ownership. And it makes it very, very hard to make a real project have any heft to be a reality. This ownership, with great patience, has assembled the lots to make this a reality. And we are very excited and hope this project can become a real reality with your votes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Sue Osborne.
Hi, I'm Sue Osborne. I live in Laguna Beach. I have a business in Dana Point, and I am a tenant of Majestic. They've been very good landlords to me, and I hope I have been with them. I have a protection on my lease, so I'm not a tenant who's complaining about losing the space, because they're covering me on that if they do develop. But I am here to represent my customers. I truly believe the city managers thought there was a lot of transparency on this development. And what disturbs me mostly is that no one seems to know. I have day after day after day people coming in who have no idea about this development. It hasn't been transparent at all. And I think it's their town, and they need to be able to see what's going to become of it. I think if Majestic feels satisfied with their plan, and they have come a long ways from the get-go, that it's time for them to put out signs to show this, like 4x6 architectural renderings on the building areas, on the sites, so when people drive by, they can see what's going to be developed. The story pooling didn't work because of the size of it, they said, but this is something they can do. They have a plan, it's a good design, it looks nice, but it is massive, and the residents need to know. And they don't. I would say my guess would be 20% are aware of this development, and that's it. And another concern is the density of condos versus retail. We have 138,000, almost 139,000 square feet of condominiums versus 32,500, I'm guessing, retail space, which is 15 to 20 stores. They don't want J. Crews, they want bead stores. And no, it's more of a housing development for the city core. If that ratio was reversed, where you have 75% commercial use, 25% habitable living space, that would be more of a center. And the last thing, there's more I wanted to say, but there's another issue that's troubled me, it's not Majestic's problem, they didn't bring it up, but water. Where's all this water coming from for all this development? for Southern California. There's a lot of development we're talking about, and I haven't heard of any desalination plants or where water is going to come from if this drought and climate change continues. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Trent Hoffenberger.
Good evening, council members. It's Trent Hofferber, a 40-year resident and property owner in Dana Point. And I have been around a long time here in seen and worked on a lot of projects in this town. But I really do feel that we need to follow the plan. We need to not allow the variance for 40 feet for 4 floors of residential. And I'm also very concerned about the parking. My home is within a block of this project, and parking is extremely difficult there right now without any development going on in the couplet. So if we can follow the plan and not allow the variance for the 4 stories of residential, which was not the intent of the plan, and at some point get the parking study reevaluated so when future projects come in that the parking will not be an issue in lieu of, because no one has decided when there would be a parking structure built. And thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Betty Hill. And then after Betty, our next 4 speakers will be Brett Davis, John Nucio, Richard Curtis, and Keith Johannes.
Hello, I'm Betty Hill, and I live in Dana Point. The town center plan envisioned a small town village atmosphere, and I don't think this project looks like that at all. Let's get down to what's really the basis here. This project could be done in 3 floors, but by doing 4 floors, Majestic makes another $13 million, basically. They have 3% of the area of the town center, and they have over 40% of the anticipated residential usage. They have 86% of their building is for residences, and the town center plan envisioned about 33%, about 1 floor. So there's a huge difference in that. What you're voting on tonight will impact the future development in the town. And 3 councilmen voting tonight won't be on the council in just a few weeks, days. And what we were hoping, just a few weeks ago, you asked the city to spend another $7.7 million on the town center plan, $20 million altogether. And now, here you are, at the same time we're spending the money, asking for changes in that plan, and somehow that doesn't seem right to me. So I would request that you continue the appeal until the next council can actually look at the project and make that decision based on presumably what residents want when they elect these new councilmen. The other issue that I'm worried about a little bit are the donations that have been made to one of our councilmen. Majestic, a Texas developer, has felt that they want to donate money to one of the councilmen. We have a Las Vegas resident and a person that's interested in town center property. He's donated over $8,000 to this councilman. And I don't think Dana Point residents appreciate that kind of politics in our city. So we would respectfully request that in the interest of integrity and honesty, that councilman recuse himself tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brett Davis.
Hi, Brett Davis, resident of Dana Point. I've spent many years here in Dana Point with the exception of a small sabbatical in Mammoth, but recently I've moved back and, you know, I work hard, I've lived here, I enjoy to surf, and I really think this is, you know, change is painful. It is painful for everybody. But with change brings growth. And I think times are changing, and it's inevitable that something's got to be done with our town center. My parents were out here recently visiting from another state, and they're in their 70s, elderly, and my dad says, Brett, your mother wants to go shopping. Where am I going to take her? You know, and we're going to stay here in Dana Point. And, you know, I really didn't know what to tell him, really. And, you know, they'd been down to the Marine Center, and Marine Institute, loved that, walked along the strands. That's a great view. But I just didn't have an answer for him, and I sent him up to our neighbors up north in Laguna or down to Del Mar and San Clemente, and I just think it would be so wonderful to have a place like that here if we can work out the bugs and everybody be somewhat happy with the answers, so we can all enjoy a place, growth, times are changing, a place that people will come to Dana Point and spend their money. People now, I think, Dana Point's beautiful, but it's just not an attraction here for tourists to come spend their money, and I definitely am aware of some of the others, their concerns. But I hope that we can work out the differences in all that's been said tonight, and move ahead with this project and accept change, and the times are coming. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is John Nucio. John, are you here? We'll now move on to Richard Curtis.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Richard Curtis. I'm, I guess, the demographic that the Majestic is looking for. 5 years ago, I was a move down from Los Angeles County, retired here, and I'll be drawing my last breath in Dana Point. So I have as much interest as everyone who's lived here for a long, long time in all of this. I attended all of the Planning Commission meetings and the study sessions on the Majestic project. They were at an audience that was a lot bigger than this, and the audience was not generally in favor of the Majestic project. However, I've spoken to the people from Majestic. They have been very receptive to a lot of the aesthetic considerations that had been raised during those study sessions, and I think they're responsible people. However, I want to address, as everybody else has been addressing tonight, the parking situation, and I'm not going to rehash what everybody else has been saying. I just wanted to point out what I think is fatal flaws in the considerations that the city staff has been presenting as to how this is all going to take place. First, one of the commissioners who did not vote for the variances in the 2-2 tie did express the consideration that it's fortunate to have a builder as big as Majestic that can afford to do underground parking digs. So that's a point in their favor, 2 big points in their favor. If the town center were planned or developed piecemeal, there'd be smaller developers and they would not have the wherewithal to do that sort of thing. Nonetheless, I raised the issue with the Planning Commission. I decide after all this is built, I'm going to drive down the hill and have dinner at one of the new restaurants in the Majestic Center. And what good does paying an in-lieu fee to the city for in-lieu parking spaces when the spaces don't exist? What good does that do the residents and the visitors to Dana Point when they can't find a parking place? The biggest fatal flaw, as I understand it in the Nygaard-Nelson parking study, and I haven't read it, I'm only operating on what staff put out at the last meeting, was that the study was conducted on a Tuesday night, and I think they said there were 1,000 free spaces that were unused. That was before the changes to the routing on PCH, and certainly wasn't done on a Friday night or a Saturday night. I mean, most of the restaurants in Dana Point have Taco Tuesday. Why is that? Because without it, it'd be the deadest night of the week. They'd have to close their doors. So if we're going to determine what we need for parking, and Friday and Saturday, the residents of these multiple-use buildings are going to be in their parking spaces. So where are the customers going to park? So before approving any of this, I think we'd better understand what the true nature of the parking situation is. And my question is, are the 26 in-lieu spaces with or without consideration of the third floor of residences, or is it based on the 2 floors of residences that would be legal? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Keith Johannes. And then after Keith, our next 4 speakers will be Buck Hill, Mike Basalmo, the person known as Russ, no last name, and Paul Hinman.
Good evening, Council. I'm Keith Johannes, a 45-year resident of Lantern Village, and can corroborate some of the parking issues that are between my home and the town center plan. So I think parking is one of the greatest issues involved here. And I think everybody here supports the town center plan. We want something done, and we don't want it held up. However, a majority, I feel, want to have it as written. And what has happened here is that the way this project is approaching town center plan is taking it to the max, first of all, and then twisting some of the other ways in interpreting it to go even beyond that. So I think we need to go back and relook at if we need to go back and look at the town center, that's probably going to take a lot longer. So I think the best thing to do would be to postpone this hearing until there is a full new council. But there is one other area that I wanted to say besides the residential over business thing that had been mentioned before, is that tonight I noticed that they talked about they were not going to be contributing to art in public places or to the parks. And then they were going to offer the open space in that place. Well, that's a coming and going open space. It's not there all the time. So I think that's one of the issues that we need to take a look at as well. Other than that, I think everybody else has spoken very well on this, much better than I can. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Buck Hill.
Hi, Buck Hill, a longtime Dana Point resident. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm going to talk about variances, and the one I'm going to focus on is 3 floors, but parking has been mentioned. Not mentioned by the staff or anybody is that there are lots of extensions above the 40-foot limit that are purely decorative. That requires a variance, so I think we're missing some. Likewise, everything on Pacific Coast Highway above 30 feet has to be set back an extra 10 feet. That is not the case in this. So there are quite a few variances that need to be dealt with. Now, looking, for example, at the fourth floor versus 3 floors, there are some very strict legal requirements here. And if you look on page 20 of the staff report, you'll see these where the city is asked to swear to that these variances are all justified. And I think it's almost ridiculous. The number 1 criteria on those pages, strict enforcement of the code for 3-4 limits would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. And the reason given is because the lot is so big and goes from one street to another. A big lot does not present a building problem. No evidence was put in the record of any of these planning meetings or in any of the staff reports as to what is the difficulty. Where's the hardship created by the fact that you've got a big lot? These lots are relatively flat. The drop from PCH to Del Prado is about 1 foot on Amber Lantern, 2 feet on the inside, 5 feet on the phase 3. So there's no real reason. No evidence was presented, no testimony. How does adding a floor relieve this problem that the lot can't be built without a variance? It's got to be easier to build 3 floors than 4 floors. The only reason is it's economic. They want to make more money on it, but that is not a legal basis to make a variance. The second category, exceptional circumstances which do not apply to other properties. that this has exceptional circumstances. It's ridiculous. Going from PCH to Del Prado is an advantage, not an exceptional handicap. Size yields economies of scale. They can build their garages much cheaper because they only need one ramp to go from floor to floor because of the size. The third criteria, application of zoning codes deprives the applicant of privileges enjoyed by other properties. No other people have a variance for a fourth floor. So that's not the last one. Granting the variance will not constitute a special grant of special privilege. This is a grant of special privilege. All of these variances will be turned down if Dana Point is sued by residents or by some other property owner. When they're turned down, there's a tremendous liability created. You people will have to be signing that these variances are indeed required and necessary and represent all these criteria I'm listing. And I think that simply is not true. You're going to leave the city with a heritage of liabilities which you are creating. I think it's a crazy decision. These variances are unjustified.
Okay, our next speaker is Mike Balsamo.
Good evening, Mayor Bartlett and council members. My name is Mike Balsamo. I'm with the Building Industry Association, Orange County chapter. We represent over 1,100 member companies and over 100,000 employees involved in the business of home building here in Southern California. Our mission is to champion housing as the foundation of vibrant and sustainable communities. The Lantern District Specific Plan is the result of a lengthy community-based planning process where a number of planning policy issues were comprehensively debated. The resulting plan that was adopted presents an opportunity for the city of Dana Point to revitalize its downtown and set the city apart from its South County neighbors from a competitive standpoint. As a South County resident, and I live in Aliso Viejo, my opinion is that today the Lantern District is not reaching its true potential. Following the planning process, the City Council has demonstrated strong leadership by initiating significant capital investment with the commencement of the public improvements along PCH and Del Prado. Looking to the next stage, if the specific plan is implemented based upon market demand, the Lantern District could become a shining star in South Orange County that promotes a livable, pedestrian-scaled community that mixes residential, retail, restaurant, and employment uses within a compact framework. This model is precisely what regional planning agencies like SCAG are promoting since the passage of SB 375. Furthermore, it's the ideal of leading planning and development professionals in the industry. And it's being embraced throughout Orange County. I want to mention SCAG also projects 432,000 more people in Orange County in the next 20 years. So we've all got to do our part to accommodate growth. A vibrant downtown will further enhance a sense of place for Dana Point and expand on your well-known amenities such as the harbor and the amazing hotels and resorts. Why am I telling you what you already know? Because in order to achieve this vision, it will once again require leadership from this City Council to allow for the first significant private investment in the area. You have the ability to take that step this evening by approving the Majestic development proposal. From an industry standpoint, it's incredibly complex and expensive to construct buildings of this type. A typical subterranean structured parking space, just one space, costs about $30,000. For a development like this to make sense economically, there must be at least 4 levels of occupied space above the parking. And I can't think of any recent examples of this construction type in Orange County with fewer than 4 stories. I would applaud the architecture. The 4th story is almost imperceptible from the elevations that were shown tonight. It's very subtle. But really, this change the council and the city are looking for, it's an all-in thing, and embracing a new type of development in town. And it is a little bit different in how it operates in terms of the parking and the architecture. I want to emphasize the proposal is recommended for approval by your staff. It's materially consistent with the Lantern District specific plan in terms of height and other criteria. Also, it will bring significant public benefit to the city of Dana Point as enumerated by the applicant. So on behalf of BIA, thank you for allowing me to present our views, and we urge your approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Russ from Oceanside.
Hi, I'm Russ McKissick. We're moving back to Dana Point from Oceanside. We used to live up at El Encanto, and so now we're going to be moving back to Granada in the Lantern District. And I'm an engineer, and I wanted to speak tonight about a couple of things. The first one is the parking situation. I lived in Marina del Rey when they built those gigantic condos, 109 condos on the west end of Marina del Rey by the beach. I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you drive down Washington, they're on the left-hand side, and the Venice canals are on the right-hand side. So they did the same thing with the tandem parking, and they did a bunch of in-lieu parking. And this goes back many, many years ago. And so what happened was they did some gerrymandering in the political structure, and the Planning Commission split the Marina del Rey Development Planning Commission separate from the Venice Planning Commission, so because they wanted to redevelop Venice and then they wanted to develop Marina del Rey. So basically what happened was they approved the condo complex without involving the residents of Marina del Rey, and so then they ended up with this same in-lieu parking problem where they were going to build a parking structure and they never built it. And so every morning you had this mass exodus of people who would park their cars over in the Venice Canal residential streets, and there were 30 to 60 people parking their cars over there, and there was a huge amount of vandalism by the residents of these cars. They would stab the tires with knives, and they would it became kind of a comical thing, but it was dangerous because they would have fights on the streets between the Marina del Rey people and the Venice people. So, and I lived in the Marina Towers, and so it was a wonderful place to live, but which is a separate complex. So I would strongly urge that we get the parking plan done and figure it out before we approve this massive project. The second thing is, being an engineer, I went ahead and took a total station and shot the elevations to try and get an idea from several different areas. I took pictures of, so like one area is Granada, the top of Granada from Selva looking down. This project would become this almost this massive structure that comes right up to the ocean view from the top of Selva, and then also it obliterates the view, or I guess it's what would be called site pollution in the Caltrans or the state of California concept. And so, I mean, it's this beautiful articulation they're attempting to do, but it still does end up with a massive building, which we're moving back here because of the beautiful surf-oriented environment of the Lantern District, and we specifically wanted to move back here. We have great neighbors, so it's a wonderful environment, but I'm not looking forward to the parking and this massive wall that's going to be between us and the ocean. So thanks very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Paul Hinman. Then after Paul, our final three speakers will be Harold Kaufman, Carol Reimer, and Rick Morgan.
Good evening, Council. Paul Hinman, Dana Point. I love Dana Point. I've made it my home for 46 years. Obviously, I've seen a lot of changes in 46 years, and that's a good thing. I hope to see a lot more changes in the coming years, and that's good too, if the changes are done properly. In the run-up to this meeting, as staff pointed out, there's been numerous meetings, both for Majestic Project and the Doheny Hotel, Planning Commission, City Council meetings. In these meetings, there's been an opportunity for quite a bit of public input. And if you've been listening, you know there's an overwhelming sense of the citizens of the community. And the overwhelming sense is that there's still changes that need to be made to this development. I have heard in several of the meetings from several of the speakers describing Dana Point as a gem. And I'd like to expand that analogy here for a minute. There are many places where gemstones can be found, but they don't just appear in alluvial gravel as polished jewels. They're just rocks, pebbles, and there are many steps you must go through to turn them into the gems that you want them to be. First, you must cut the stone with attention to the grain and crystal lattice structure of the stone. If done incorrectly, you irrevocably ruin the stone. Secondly, it must be faceted, a delicate operation to assure the solid geometry and the planes and angles are right to make the gem sparkle. If done incorrectly, the stone is condemned to be second-rate stone. And finally, it must be polished. Now, I compare the creation of the town center plan to the original cutting of the gemstone. Through a lot of hard work and intelligence, they got the town center plan right. So far, so good. To carry the analogy forward, I consider the approval of the first major developments in the town center to be the faceting of the stone. If you don't get the solid geometry of the parking and the 4 stories, etc., of the development right, you set a precedent, and our gem is irrevocably ruined, and you have a second-class city. Developers always ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars. That's what developers do. Hold them to our standards. Don't let Dana Point become a second or third class, just another beach city. Uphold the denial of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Harold Kaufman.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm Harold Kaufman, a 30-year resident of Dana Point. I'm not going to comment on whether there should be 4 stories or 3 stories. I do want to point out, however, that 2 planning commissioners at the last meeting said that they would have approved the project had they limited the 4 levels to the rear of the project and not facing Amber or Violet Lantern. My area of concern is if this project is approved tonight, or if it's even sent back to come back for something else. What has not been addressed is the possibility of vacation rentals in the property. Condition 69 talks about the CC&Rs, but there's nothing in the CC&Rs that say anything about vacation rentals, and I'm very much afraid that any condo project within this town center, whatever is built, ends up being a quasi-hotel. I would like a condition be put in the conditions that says that there are no vacation rentals. And if they want to change that, if sometime in the future, that they can't do it until they've, for example, sold 75% of the units, and then 75% of the full-time residents, along with 50% of the absentee residents, would agree that they should allow vacation rentals. Other than that, I think they should be banned, and I think there should be a condition about that in any kind of an approval. My last area of concern has to do with the roof decks. I know they're allowed on the inside where these buildings are being built. It bothers me a little bit because it really ends up being another level of living space level. Especially the elevator shafts that are so high. One of the requirements within the town center specific plan is that any elevator shaft has to be 5 foot back from the edge, and I could not see that in the plans. I looked on the website and I was not able to tell if that was done. Hopefully it is done. I didn't see the actual paper plan. So if in fact this gets approved, I hope that you take that type of thing into consideration. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Our next speaker is Carol Reimer.
Hi, my name is Carol Reamer, and I have been a resident of Dana Point for nearly 20 years, and I would hope that you would approve this project. When I have people come and visit from LA, I have to go to another city to eat. I have to go to another city to shop. When my children come in and they need to pick up something for the baby, we have to go to other stores. And I'm hoping that we could move forward and revitalize the city of Dana Point and follow all the rules and regulations that we need to follow, but please do not toss this project. It's wonderful, and I think it should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Rick Morgan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Rick Morgan. I live here in Dana Point. In reading over last week's Dana Point Times, I couldn't help but notice a stark contrast between the cover item regarding Capitol Hall Partners' proposal for the former mobile home park at Del Obispo and PCH, and the second item on page 3 regarding this appeal by Majestic Housing and Development. I was pleasantly shocked by the former account, whereby Capitol Hall has actually chosen to come up with a plan that fits the property, works in cohesion and scale and architecture with the Gateway Arch, and is in response to the voice of a significant number of those of us who live here. The latter, from what I've heard and read and seen, not so much. As with Beverly Hills Hospitality Group, who wanted to shoehorn a massive hotel into an L-shaped property across that same intersection, I find tonight's appeal, forgive the pun, I find it the height of arrogance. I simply don't understand why any of these developers feel it necessary to simply ignore our rules here in Dana Point, especially when they know what the rules are in the first place. This plan, with its variance requests and a ruinous lack of parking, is like dumping a smaller version of the St. Regis smack in the middle of town center, except there's no open space around it. The potential traffic issues are bad enough. A big concern of Dana Point has always been that we're just a place that people drive through on their way to somewhere else. Well, we've got a harbor here. We've got world-class events throughout the year. But if this is supposed to be a pedestrian-friendly area, unless you live near this pedestrian-friendly area and you can't park anywhere, you're going to drive right through Dana Point on your way to somewhere else. I look at this kind of as a repeat of the Doheny meeting on September 16th. I'm not anti-development. I think Town Center deserves something nice, but not at the expense of those of us who live here. I respectfully ask this council to deny the Majestic appeal and have them play by our rules. I ask you again to do what's right for the city and its residents. There's far too much money at stake, and this thing seems like it's suddenly moving way too fast to make a potentially disastrous decision. If we had hurried the process for the Headlands, and I think many people here remember those days, we would be stuck with 2 400-room hotels, hundreds of homes, and no open space. And I just kind of look at this as somewhat of a smaller version of that. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And at this time, that ends our public comments on this agenda item. We'll allow the applicant 10 minutes or thereabouts for a rebuttal.
Mayor, Council, thank you for letting me speak again. My architect is going to take a brief moment to pull up a slide which we think addresses a couple of the comments that were made tonight. But while he's doing that, I'm going to move forward with my rebuttal. Parking. I guess I wasn't very clear, and let me clarify the parking design and layout of our both residential and retail. We have all of our residential parking is provided under the buildings. Every required space is on site. We are not asking for any in lieu parking spaces for residential parking. We meet that criteria and we actually exceed it. We have some tandem spaces in phase 1, but we didn't even count that towards our required parking. Those are extra marketing spaces for our condo owners. On Amber and Violet Lantern, we have requested a realignment of the parking from parallel to angled parking, adding 11 new spaces to those streets. So we've included those in our parking requirements, but I wanted to let those who were concerned about Amber and Violet Lantern know that we have more parking under this plan than we do today. 2, our retail parking is also well accommodated on site. We have 111 retail spaces in our parking garages. We have an additional, I think, an additional 20 spaces on Amber and Violet Lantern. Mike may have to correct me if I'm wrong. But what's happened on Violet Lantern with our 6 live-work units, just picture for a second, we have parking for the residential above and retail parking requirements for the retail space below. And let's say it's a live-work unit and you're an architect and your family's upstairs, your house, you've parked your cars in your residential spaces. And so, yes, we are providing retail parking for customers that may never even show up. So we're more than adequately parked on Violet, but pursuant to the rules, we need to buy 18 in lieu spaces. In terms of precedent-setting variance requests, none of these variance requests that you would approve tonight are precedent-setting. All these variance requests are discretionary approvals. Next time around, you say no. You haven't set any precedent. Wanted to clarify that point. Third, retail, residential balance. All of our first floor, wherever possible, on first floor of phase 1, phase 2, and 3 is retail wherever it's possible. Of course, we have to have some areas for service and lobbies and paseos and plazas, but everywhere else, it's all retail. We've maxed out the retail. Unless we would go second and third story retail, which I think have already been proven in many cities, doesn't work. Views. At the last presentation, we showed a couple of view slides. One was taken at a location at Granada and La Cresta in front of a residence where somebody had spoken at one of the hearings or workshops, and it was concerned that maybe our project would block her view. My architect is okay. You have to do it for me? Okay, you flip it. This was taken, as I said, from Granada and La Cresta. We have dropped our buildings into the horizon. I'll go to the next slide, Mike. You can't see them, so we've highlighted them. The elevators, phase 2 elevator, this is point, phase 3 elevator, point, are hardly discernible. There will be no big blank wall of view blockage. When the the view analysis was done in conjunction with the Town Center mitigated neg deck, they evaluated views from 35, 40, 50, and 60 feet. And they concluded that no off-site views were impacted at any of those heights, 60 feet included. And I also wanted to address this whole thing about the pole staking and the story poles. We staked the properties in compliance with a city-approved plan. We took photos. We showed those photos at a workshop session. So I think we were in compliance. Our park fees, we're not getting 100% credit for our open space. We're only getting 70% credit because, as somebody pointed out, and as I said, the plazas will only be open during business hours. So we can't get 100%. It's not 100% of the time it will be open to the public. Vacation rentals. Certainly our CC&Rs will address vacation rentals. We don't want vacation rentals. These are 600,000 plus priced units. Last thing we want to do is have somebody buying a condo and renting it out and creating a lower valued type project for the rest of our units. So we're probably more anti-vacation rental than the gentleman that spoke tonight. And yes, our elevators are 5-foot setback. And we have complied with all the other setbacks that were 10 feet setbacks and that came up tonight at tonight's session. Thank you very much. And again, we respectfully ask for your approval.
Hey, council members, do we have any questions of the applicant while we've got Peggy at the microphone? Bill? Okay. Carlos? Stephen? Okay, I do have a couple of questions. With regard to the rooftop deck, are the walls solid or are they glass on top?
Glass.
Okay, so we can see through them. Great. Let's see. The elevator towers, where they stick out on top, what percentage of the overall footprint of the building? Is it like 1%? I mean, it must be minuscule. I'm just curious.
It's not much. It's an absolute minimum as required by the fire department. It needed big enough to fit a gurney.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for discussion. And then before we call for a vote, we want to ensure that every council member has a chance to speak. So at this point, why don't we start with Councilmember Breaux?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to give some overall thoughts of our discussion here and the record of the Planning Commission. A lot of people have discussed the process. The process is a 72-hour public notice. That's the process. If people have a project, they have the right to decide if they want to bring it to the city and bring it to the Planning Commission. And I think we've gone above and beyond with scoping sessions and study sessions and public input. So really appreciate the staff making that available so the public can be heard. But on the other side, it's, Ms. Tabus, I'm sure it's very onerous on your side. All these study sessions cost money in the real world. So I think the process has been very open, and the community has certainly been heard. One of your slides, you broke down the fees and the benefits to our community. $3.3 million for this one project, which is 3% of the town center. $400,000 for in-lieu spaces, 26 in-lieu spaces. $500,000 to our schools. $1.1 million to the water district. It's a lot of money into our community, not to mention the jobs, construction jobs, retail jobs, sales tax, increased property tax, and that tourism dollar that seems to be leaving us to Laguna Beach and other places that we can recapture when we have nice shops and restaurants in the town center. Another concern has been density. If you look at this project, this applicant could have built rectangle boxes and jam studio condos in here, 3 times as many condos. There's not a single studio in any of the phases. They've opened up a center courtyard in phase 1. There's 10 one-bedrooms, 93 two-bedrooms, and 7 or so three-bedrooms. So clearly, the applicant isn't trying to get all the money they can out of their properties. Plus, they could have taken that alleyway. It's your property. They're still affording the city an easement. So this could have been far more dense than what's presented here. The parking. Parking also is a process. The town's original town center subcommittee punted on it. They didn't have an answer. They said maybe we'll do a parking structure, maybe in lieu. So when we decided to move forward on town center, we asked for a parking study. And they found there's almost 3,000 public and private parking spaces. 80% of them are in off-street lots. So the idea was to manage our parking so that a person could come in, park once, and then go shop, go to work in the town center. It's more of a management thing. There's no lack of parking spots in the town center. So we have this consultant who is now, it takes time. The Coastal Commission, takes forever to deliberate and get back to us. But this is a work in progress. The council unanimously approved the in-lieu fee program, which was one of the recommendations for Regional Town Center Subcommittee. So I think Ms. Tabus just addressed that all their residential parking is there. They're creating spots that they don't even get credit for on the streets. And so what we approved in lieu parking fee program is precisely what they're taking advantage of. And finally, the 4 stories. In my reading of the town center plan, and I think Ms. Tabus has captured this, I don't think the town center subcommittee envisioned people putting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parcels together. They looked at individual parcels. That's why you had the 40-foot setback for retail on the first floor, but they didn't envision somebody going Del Prado to PCH. So when you have that, it's not addressed in the town center plan what to do outside that normal lot. And there's a specific line in here that says, if an issue, condition, or situation arises not sufficiently covered in the plan, look at the code and similar issues, conditions, situations, and you can get community development director's approval. So clearly, there are things that weren't foreseen, and I think this accumulation of lots is one of them. I don't think they envision somebody buying up 6, 7 parcels and trying to do a larger project. So those are some of my initial thoughts. I'd be happy to hear what my fellow colleagues have to say.
Okay, next we'll move on to Councilmember Olvera.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, we've received an awful lot of emails and correspondence of a lot of people's position and impression of the town center plan and this project. One of the most recurring comments was follow the town center plan and stick to that. And that's been again mentioned quite a bit here tonight. Some of the things that we've gotten into, what the town center plan is helping us with, which is a benefit, are these businesses. Now, many of you, I've been a 31-year resident here. We used to have Connor's Department Store, Bannister Stationery, Sherry's Bakery, the bookstore. All of those are gone now. And they kind of been sucked away by the malls. We always wanted to keep those mom and pop stores, those small stores, not the big block stores. And so we've lost them. And we talk about, as council people, city people, our leakage. That means people that, one speaker even talked about it, where do you go eat dinner, where do you go shop? So we'd like to keep that in Dana Point. This town center plan addresses those issues. And to do so, you need the shoppers as well. And so that is the critical mass that is talked about in the town center plan, that you need the residents to participate and live there. Now, one of the things I see is, like a person I talked to recently said, sure like to get one of those top floor condos, because then they wouldn't need a car. They could just go downstairs and do all their shopping and eat, get their groceries, a little couple of fast food, and sit around and visit, and then go back upstairs. I pretty much do that already, but I have to drive down to the harbor. That's where I kind of hang out. So we need the residential as part of the town center plan. The town center plan, the guiding principles, talks about to create a town center without resorting to the creation or redevelopment. That's kind of what Councilman Breaux was trying to address. In redevelopment, you use eminent domain, and that way the city could take multiple lots and put it together. So the town center plan was trying to encourage private enterprise to come in and build. And Majestic has kind of overwhelmed us with 3 phases that kind of took us by surprise, and kind of gives us the attitude that we ought to slow down and take a look at it. But the staff has shown, we've gone over several public meetings over 3 months, and that the process has worked. And we have received a lot of comments, and we have had iterations made by Majestic in order to make this project. It keeps getting, it could be a lot more dense, as some people were very concerned about. Earlier, in some of my questions, I touched upon the parking. And our parking, all of it's in Policy 4. And again, we're not done, the city of Dana Point is not done with its parking program. And in the staff report, And I do hope everybody has an opportunity to go online and read the staff report, because a lot of the stuff that we have seen as questions being answered either through questions being asked either through mailers or in the newspaper are answered in that staff report. A lot of those questions were taken to heart in trying to produce an answer for them. In lieu parking. A condition of approval has been incorporated that requires the applicable in lieu parking spaces must be identified prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued for the associated retail spaces. So the stores can't open until after the city identifies those parking places. Majezik's presentation mentioned earlier about some city-identified additional parking spots, and I'm looking forward to seeing that and making that happen. Parking is a management issue. It's not a design issue. We've got extra parking spots now. We expect those to decrease. Those requests for additional or updated parking studies are valid requests, and they will be done because we have to actually have a plan that is approved. The story variance, again, we've all read it. Several of us have read it. The maximum height is 40 feet, 3 stories. And the attachments to those 3 stories are count 2 levels of above-grade parking as a single story. So that's, the first floor is going to be 2 levels of parking. Also, could be, not is, could be. Also, let me wing it. It says that the first floor, it has to have a 40-foot setback for retail, and it says it's on Pacific Coast Highway and Del Prado. It doesn't address the side streets. So, based on some of the questions I've heard, I think there is an expectation that if you stand on Violet Lantern looking west, that you would see at the end 40 feet height, according to the town center plan, and then interpret the 3 stories to drop down to 30 feet in between. I'm not sure what that buys us, dropping down that, cutting off 10 feet. But I'm not looking at it whether one way or the other is cheaper or more expensive. I really don't care. I'm just looking at the design. So I think staying within the town center plan is what we're actually trying to do. And the town center plan pretty much talks about all those little idiosyncrasies, including, as was one comment, about what goes up on the roof decks, projections, and the town center plan specifically addresses that as well. And then there's a map in the back of the drawings that says those projections above the 40-foot height are 2% of the floor area of the roof. So a 2% projection for another 5 or 6 feet doesn't seem like it's going to be, and our last slide was trying to show where the elevator shafts were, if we could see those. So I think we're doing okay as far as trying to stay with our town center plan, and that's what most of the people are telling me. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, it's always nice to go third because my 2 colleagues have said about 2/3 of what I wanted to say. We keep hearing about density. I think we got the wrong words. It's not density, as we heard and we've seen over the last few weeks. There are projects that are a lot more dense. They just don't happen to be this large. So we're talking about a large project, not a dense project. There is, that may be playing with semantics, but I think it's using the right words in the right place. I was on the Town Center Subcommittee from day one. There are a lot of things we talked about. One of them that we never talked about is the thought that somebody would be able to gobble enough lots together to go from Del Prado to the PCH. If you look at Town Center, I believe there's 150 parcels owned by 80 or 90 owners. I forgot the exact numbers, but I'm close in magnitude. And we thought we'd be lucky if somebody could buy 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 lots next to them and call it a day. As we've seen, I think some of them are finding out that some of these parcels are a little on the slow side, on the small side. We have the parcel across from Lux that I think they're starting to figure out doesn't pencil out because it's too small for the investment they have to make. And so when I look at this 4th floor, I look at it in a very pragmatic sense. We literally have 2 choices. We can give them the 4th floor. They're under the 40 feet, so no harm, no foul there. So from the, quote, air, or the sky, you don't see any difference in the roof line. Or we can tell them to take out the 4th floor. And to make up for those units that are on the 4th floor, we may lose the courtyard. And I would rather have the 4th floor than the courtyard, because I think the open air to both the units in the back of the building is worth more than looking at another brick building 10 feet away, whichever happens to get built next to you. We all talk about parking. We don't have a parking problem. We have a management problem, parking management problem. We have parking sometimes in the wrong places. There are plans afoot to put parking in town center. If we can get it approved and by both the property owner, that will add a number of spaces that are going to be shared by all the businesses around this particular location. I think as time goes on, we may have to build a structure at some point, or we may find out the San Clemente plan works great, which basically, for those that don't remember it, is that when you go to a restaurant, you park once. Even if you happen to go to the dress shop next door or the coffee shop, you don't move your car, so you don't need 3 parking spots just because you went to 3 stores. And it seems to be working in San Clemente. I go down there for the street fairs, never have a problem parking. And so it looks like it's a good plan. We've got other projects coming up that, we look at the Union Bank building. From what I gather, there was very little negativity said about that project, but that is a 4-story building. So we're going to have another 4-story decision to make when the Union Bank building comes up. And it's 4 stories for a different reason, but part of it is some of the requirements, from what I understand. I'll listen to my other colleague, and then I will entertain making a motion. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, land use decisions are some of the toughest decisions that come before an elected body. There's a lot of emotion involved in it. You've got a difference in, what the community is going to look like, the look and feel in the area. We've got a town center plan. The town center plan that we currently have never really took into account the fact that we could have potentially street to street from Del Prado to PCH. So when you take a look at the opportunity to have that and have a consistent theme between the 2 streets and have some continuity, I think we'd all rather have some continuity in structures rather than have 5 or 6 structures all stacked next to each other with different architectural themes. It would look like a hodgepodge like you see in a lot of other cities. So to have a consistent theme, I think, is probably something that would be beneficial for the community, and it's something that we'd all like. With regard to the 18 to 19-foot ceiling heights on the retail level, there have been a lot of studies that have shown that in order to attract some great retail tenants, some anchor tenants in those spaces, whether it be a Greenleaf Cafe or a clothing store, All of the new structures have the 18 and 19-foot ceiling on that retail floor because that's what attracts that great tenant mix. The people who come in want the high ceilings. The tenants want the high ceilings. That's where you're going to attract your best opportunity for bringing in the kinds of businesses that you want to have operate in our town center. So that's why we allowed for the 18 and 19-foot ceiling heights in the retail section. When you talk about street-to-street development and the 40-foot ceiling, when you talk about the interior portion of the project, the reason they're asking for the 4 stories is because the 3 stories, when you drop down, then wouldn't really make sense, and it doesn't really change the height at all. And you can't have retail on the interior because it just won't make it. You can have it from the street level, and it's fine, but when you've got it on the interior, especially with the courtyard closed at night, the retail would die. There's just not enough business coming in to really make it work. So, that's why you've got the request to have the 4 stories in that in the center section there. On the density, it's correct. We could have a project that's extremely more dense than what we have being proposed here. So with 109 units, it's certainly better than 150. I do have concerns about the parking, though. So when you take a look at the overall project, we're looking at about 3% of the town center space that this footprint would take for the various parcels to be developed. And I think the one concern I have, I get back to, is the parking. I know right now, with just the spaces that have been eliminated for parking on PCH, I go to the UPS store, and there's very limited parking right there. And we're fighting with the Japanese restaurant that's next door, who takes over the spaces from time to time. So if I can't find a parking space there, I leave. And I don't want people to come down to town center and not be able to find a parking space, and they leave. That's not what we have our town center planned for. So the parking is a real issue for me. And we talk about the proponent for the project is saying, well, we will identify in lieu parking. We need those 26 spaces, 18 in phase 3, for instance. It's not just a matter of identifying spaces. I would want those spaces in place where people can actually go right away once that building is finished and actually park, not just saying we've got a vacant lot down the street and we're going to have that as our in lieu parking, but it's going to take 4 months to get it blacktopped and set up for parking. So, while the plan is not perfect in all of the elements, I think it meets conceptually our ideas for a town center plan. Like I said, I would rather have one project from street to street that is consistent in its theme and look and feel, rather than a hodgepodge of different structures. Also, we've got the opportunity, parking is going to be at a premium, and it's always going to be an issue in town center. To have the opportunity to have a significant amount of subterranean parking is huge. If you've got one project with subterranean parking, that's fantastic. If you've got a multitude of small projects, you're not going to have the opportunity to have the subterranean parking, and that's really a key element of this project. So in looking at the parking issue, again, I would suggest that each phase of the project, the applicant would not be able to get a certificate of occupancy to actually move into that phase of the project until the parking for the in lieu is actually in place, not just identified, but in place. That would be one component that I would request. So at this time, I'll bring it back to the council for further discussion, or if we have any questions of the applicant or staff. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'll make a motion, we approve the recommended action.
I'll second.
May I ask a moment, just one quick clarification? And that is, earlier in the discussion, the applicant indicated that they would prohibit, or were in favor of prohibiting vacation rentals, so I would only suggest the council consider in their motion to take the applicant up on their offer and include that as a condition.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I'd also like to include...
I will include that, even though I thought that was in the town center plan originally. So help me out.
Well, I think the easiest thing to do would be to add a condition L, sub item L, to condition number 69, that would simply say that the CC&R shall provide that no vacation rentals are permitted. And while I have the microphone for a moment, With respect to the parking issue and the in lieu fee that we've heard some discussion on, there are some provisions in law that are a little bit difficult on this issue. Bear in mind that the way in lieu fees work, the applicant pays the fee, but the city is responsible to provide for the actual parking sites. So, for instance, under the Subdivision Map Act, this is a condition that's outside of the control of the applicant. Under the Subdivision Map Act, which I think by analogy someone could argue would apply, if the city didn't come through within 120 days, the condition would be waived. So in order to achieve what I think you're trying to do, I think that perhaps a better way to reword Condition 79 would be to say that that the applicant must pay the fee prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. So the applicant's now out the money. That gives the city the ability to go and actually fund the parking location. And then we could go on to say that the city will have endeavored to provide the parking spaces, which I think is enforceable language. I also want to point out, just for the sake of the audience, that the city is currently negotiating to try and find some actual sites that once we have the money, we can. I don't think there's going to be a problem providing the sites, is what I'm saying. We just need the money. So if we change that condition, as I suggested, I think it achieves what you're trying to do and eliminates the legal consequences that I'm worried about.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask, you're talking about number 79, which talks about the final landscape, or am I off?
Page 37.
Am I off pages?
Page 37 of the staff report.
I was the wrong 79. So there's no excuses around. Is it all right to say that the applicant would pay the in lieu fee 120 days before request for occupancy?
We were just discussing, and I think Ursula's suggestion would be concurrent with recording of the map, that the in lieu fee would be paid, which is an even sooner time. We want the money as soon as possible, so we can secure the parking spaces.
Okay.
So my suggested language would be concurrent with the recording of the map for the retail commercial, I'm sorry, let's see, I'm making up this language as I'm reading, so give me a second here. Concurrent with the recording of the map related to the project, the applicant shall have paid all applicable in lieu fees and
Lawyers make it up on the fly.
And the city shall endeavor to identify the corresponding number of in lieu spaces in the town center area prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy. So that would be my proposed amendment to condition number 79.
Okay, but it's just an endeavor to locate spaces, but not a guaranteed.
Well, the city is responsible for that. If we have the money, then we'll be able to do it.
Then the ball's in our court.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, question for the applicant. On the subterranean parking, is there any possibility of expanding the subterranean parking to accommodate more spaces on site?
We expanded the, Peggy Tabus, Majestic. We expanded the second level down to the extent that we could, which is how we have picked up the 40 additional spaces. If we go any further, we're going down to another level and a considerable increase in cost.
Right. Okay, that's cost prohibitive at that point.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Is that 40 public spaces?
All of the retail parking underground that we provide is public. All of it. Every single space, public. Except for the residential parking will not be public.
No, understand.
But the retail parking will be public. Right, but all of the retail parking in the subterranean garages are open to the public.
So in phase 1, you don't need any in lieu?
We need 8.
You need 8. Okay.
Phase 2, 0.
And phase 3 was 18, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'll add whatever you said to number 79.
As well as what we suggested for number 69? That was the CC&R vacation rental prohibition?
Yes.
And I'll concur with both addendums.
I still have an issue with the parking. There is, and I know it's incumbent upon the city to locate suitable additional parking. I just have a real problem if they need those 26 spaces. They've got people ready to move in, and we can't provide the parking. And we, with the PCH side right now with no parking, I can tell you there is some difficulty in finding parking spaces from time to time. I can just imagine when we've got, a large 109 unit and 32,500 square feet of retail there too. Yes,
Just a
Councilman.
couple things more to throw in about the parking. We are going to, well, we were supposed to have it this year, but next year we're going to try to start the Tri-City Trolley. That'll allow people to come in and take public transportation to get into our downtown. And then you also have to remember that we've got a couple of different uses. You may have a 9 to 5 service, accountant, lawyer, a hardware store, and then those free up for the nighttime. And you remember at our last council meeting, we began negotiations with a vacant lot to find some more parking. So again, it takes time, but we are actively trying to address the parking issue, and it's going to take a time for them to build and construct. So I think by the time they're there, we'll have the parking.
Well, and I think the
managed.
Tri-City Trolley is a great idea, and people can come down and take the trolley, but they can't take the trolley if they come down and they can't find a place to park their car. So that's where I have a concern.
Well, again, we're looking at, we do our special events, we do it at the high school. I don't know if this is part of the parking analysis, but we should be talking to the post office. After 5 o'clock, they have an employee parking spot right there in town center, and on Sundays as well. So we should actively talk to the post office. I know when they talked about purchasing the post office and relocating them, we would have access to the 70 parcels on the post
Exactly.
office. So there's a lot of opportunities, but you're right. We need to get our parking house in order, and we're working on it.
Well, but when you take a look at the available parcels for in lieu parking, we know where the vacant lots are, and we know where these structures are going. We don't have a lot of those vacant lots that are near. People aren't going to walk 3 blocks to come to these, the retail shops, for instance. So that's where I have some concerns. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem. You made your motion?
We made our motion. We have a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I oppose, just for the parking issue. Okay, and that passes 3-1. We have no unfinished business. We have no new business. At this time, we'll move on to staff reports. City Manager.
I only have one staff report, and I'm pleased to report to the public as well as the council that we had a tremendous milestone. Fran Kane turned 95 yesterday, and last week, last week in early celebration of her birthday, but also to acknowledge her 25 years of service to the city of Dana Point and over 10,000 hours of volunteer service. The sheriff provided Fran with a certain and very special recognition and commendation at the sheriff's headquarters. So I want to thank Sandy Hutchins for acknowledging Fran, but also we're very honored and we've been blessed to have someone like Fran in our community. 95, and I told her when she turns 100, we'll both retire. So she has a goal to make it to 100. So God willing and Godspeed, she'll be retiring at 100. So just wanted to point that out to the community.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney Munoz.
I have nothing this evening.
Okay, we'll start with council reports. Councilmember Olvera.
Nothing to report, and I'll turn my meetings to the city clerk.
Okay, Councilmember Bro.
Thanks, Mayor Bartlett. Just one meeting to report. I attended the Dana Point Chamber of Commerce mixer at Tavern on the Coast and Sundara on October 16th, and that concludes my report.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll turn in my meetings to the city clerk. I wish everybody a happy trick-or-treating day. And just remember, adults can go trick-or-treating for adult beverages.
Okay, and I have, to announce the Halloween Fall Family Fun, Wednesday, October 29th, 3 to 7 o'clock at the Capel Beach Farmers Market. Events include costume parade, Halloween crafts, Halloween hula hooping, and local entertainment. So come and join the fun. We also have the application period is now open to become an Orange County Grand Juror. Applications will be taken up until January 23rd of 2015. So if you'd like to be part of the County of Orange Grand Jury Pool, we've got a copy of the application here, and we'll have that at the front desk at City Hall. And let's see. I attended a number of my usual meetings, and we had an interesting meeting at the South Orange County Association of Mayors. I also attended the Aliso Viejo State of the City, and the final Fish for Life event at Dana Wharf Sport Fishing, where we take out special needs kids for the day of fishing. And we had our last event for the year, and it was really wonderful to see them come down the red carpet and go out for a day of fishing. Let's see, this morning I was the guest speaker at Nagel Shores Men's Club. And then everyone, if you're interested in our Dana Point Turkey Trot, it's November the 27th, so please contact our Chamber of Commerce and sign up online or call the Chamber. And then if you need to have, in addition of the Dana Point community news, we have those available around town and at City Hall and here at the Community Center as well. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting until our next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be November the 18th. We will not have a meeting for the City Council on November 4th due to the City Hall being a polling place. So be sure to vote. We're going to expect a low turnout this year, so every vote counts. With that, we'll conclude our meeting. Thank you.